My phone rang at 11:30 on a Tuesday night, and I knew before answering that it would be Ryan demanding money again. His voice came through sharp and entitled, telling me I needed to transfer $50,000 for his wedding by Friday. When I reminded him that our mother's estate had given him the house while I got nothing, he cut me off with a threat that made my blood run cold. 3 weeks later, he called again, this time, sweet as honey, inviting me to a reconciliation birthday dinner at an upscale restaurant downtown. I should have known better, but hope is a dangerous thing when it comes to family. Walking into that restaurant, I saw 3 lawyers sitting at our table with stacks of documents, and Ryan's smirk told me everything. He said I'd sign power of attorney or face a lawsuit that would destroy me. I noticed someone entering behind me and smiled. The whole mess really started 2 years ago when our mother passed away from what we thought was a sudden heart condition. Ryan, being 5 years older and always mom's golden boy, had somehow convinced her to name him executor of her estate years before she died. I was deep in grief, barely able to function, just trying to get through each day without breaking down completely. When Ryan sat me down a week after the funeral and explained that mom's estate contained only the family house and about $20,000 in savings, I believed him without question. Why would I doubt my own brother during the darkest time of my life? He showed me paperwork, pointed to numbers, and said the house was worth about $400,000, but had a remaining mortgage of $150,000. Since he'd been living there, taking care of Mom during her final years, it made sense for him to keep the house. I'd get the $20,000 in savings. It seemed fair enough at the time, especially since I was living in my small apartment above my bakery and couldn't imagine moving back to that house full of memories. What I didn't know was that 6 months before Mom died, she'd been visited by lawyers from a trust company. She'd been investing her inheritance from our grandparents for 30 years, letting it grow quietly while living modestly. That $20,000 in checking, that was just her everyday money. The trust fund had grown to $2.8 million, carefully invested and managed, waiting to be distributed equally between her 2 children upon her death. Ryan intercepted every letter from the trust company. He changed the mailing address for Mom's estate correspondence to a private post office box. He met with the trustees privately, presenting himself as the sole beneficiary with forged documents. He'd been planning this for who knows how long. Maybe years, watching Mom's health decline and positioning himself perfectly to steal my inheritance. I found out the truth 6 months ago through pure chance. Patricia Chen, Mom's best friend from her journalism days, had been traveling abroad for 2 years on a humanitarian mission. When she returned and learned of Mom's death, she immediately tried to contact me, but found my phone number changed and my social media deleted. Ryan had told everyone I'd moved away too grief-stricken to maintain connections. Patricia was persistent, though. She hired someone to find me. When Patricia walked into my bakery on that rainy Thursday afternoon, I nearly dropped the tray of fresh croissants I was carrying. She looked exactly the same, elegant and sharp-eyed, though her hair had gone completely silver. We sat in my tiny office behind the kitchen, and she told me things that made my hands shake so badly I couldn't hold my coffee cup. Mom had confided in Patricia about the trust fund just months before her death. She'd even shown her the paperwork, proud that she'd managed to grow her parents' modest legacy into something substantial for her children. Mom had specifically said she wanted Ryan and me to split everything equally, that she'd structured it legally to ensure fairness. Patricia had documentation Mom had given her for safekeeping, including account numbers and contact information for the trustees. That evening, I hired a private investigator named Marcus Webb, a former FBI agent Patricia recommended. What he uncovered over the following weeks was a systematic pattern of deception that took my breath away. Ryan hadn't just hidden the trust fund, he'd actively forged documents, impersonated me in communications with the trustees, and even created a false paper trail suggesting I'd received my share and squandered it on failed business ventures. The investigation revealed Ryan's lavish lifestyle that I'd somehow been blind to before. The luxury cars he claimed were leased through his supposedly successful real estate business, purchased with cash from Mom's trust. The vacations to Europe, the designer clothes, the country club membership, all funded by money that was half mine. While I'd been working 16-hour days to keep my bakery afloat, serving coffee at 5 in the morning and decorating wedding cakes until midnight, he'd been living like royalty on our mother's legacy. The worst part was discovering how he'd manipulated Mom in her final months. Marcus found evidence that Ryan had convinced her to sign papers while she was heavily medicated, papers that seemed routine, but actually gave him broader powers as executor. He'd isolated her from friends, telling them she was too weak for visitors. He'd even canceled her appointments with her regular lawyer, bringing in someone new who was clearly in his pocket. And now Ryan was planning to marry Madison Worthington, a senator's daughter, who came from old money and expected to marry into more of it. He'd been courting her for a year, presenting himself as a successful entrepreneur from a wealthy family. The wedding he was planning cost more than most people's houses. 500 guests at the Riverside Country Club, flowers flown in from Ecuador, a dress from Paris, and a honeymoon on a private yacht in the Mediterranean. All of it funded by money he'd stolen from me from our mother's lifetime of careful saving and investing. The Capitale restaurant gleamed with crystal chandeliers and soft golden light that made everything look expensive and intimidating. I paused at the entrance, smoothing my simple black dress and taking a deep breath. The hostess knew exactly who I was, leading me through the maze of white-clothed tables to a private dining room in the back. My stomach churned with each step, knowing this wasn't really about reconciliation, but not yet understanding the full scope of Ryan's plan. The moment I entered that private room, I knew I'd walked into a trap. 3 men in expensive suits sat at a round table covered in legal documents. Ryan stood by the window, his back to me, hands clasped behind him in a pose of casual authority. Madison sat delicately in a chair wearing a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent, her fingers adorned with rings that caught the light. But what made my heart stop was seeing my grandmother's diamond necklace around her throat, the one Ryan had told me was lost when we cleaned out Mom's house. "Liza, so glad you could make it," Ryan said without turning around. His voice carried that particular tone of satisfaction I remembered from childhood when he'd successfully blamed me for something he'd done. "Please have a seat. We have some important business to discuss." The lawyer directly across from me stood, partially a perfunctory gesture of politeness. "Ms. Winters, I'm Harold Steinberg from Steinberg, Morrison & Watts. These are my associates, James Morrison and Helen Watts." Neither of the other lawyers bothered to acknowledge me beyond cold nods. The table was covered with official-looking documents, all with my name prominently displayed. "What is this, Ryan?" I remained standing, my hand gripping my purse strap. "You said this was a birthday dinner to reconcile." "It is your birthday next week, isn't it?" Ryan finally turned his smile sharp as broken glass. "Consider this an early gift, the gift of financial freedom from your burdens." Steinberg cleared his throat and pushed a stack of papers toward the empty chair meant for me. "Ms. Winters, we're here to discuss your substantial debts to Mr. Ryan Winters and to find an amicable solution that avoids costly litigation." The room spun slightly. What debts? I've never borrowed money from Ryan in my life. "Please sit," Madison said, her voice honeyed poison. "This is all rather embarrassing for everyone. No need to make a scene." I remained standing but moved closer to the table to see the documents. What I saw made my blood freeze. Loan agreements dating back 5 years each with my supposed signature. $50,000 for my bakery's down payment, $30,000 for culinary school tuition, $25,000 for equipment, $40,000 for apartment renovations. The list went on, reaching a total of nearly $500,000 with interest. "These are forgeries," I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. "I never signed any of these." I never borrowed this money. Morrison, a thin man with predatory eyes, spoke up. Ms. Winters, these documents have been authenticated by a forensic document examiner. Your signatures match exemplars from your known documents. If you're claiming fraud, that's a serious accusation that could result in criminal charges against you. The evidence suggests you've been avoiding repayment for years. Watts added, her voice clinical and cold. Mr. Winters has been extremely patient, but with his upcoming nuptials, he needs to settle his financial affairs. I felt my phone vibrate in my purse and glanced down at it. A message flashed on the screen that made my heart race for an entirely different reason. Interesting, I murmured, then looked directly at Ryan. Tell me, brother, how did I manage to borrow money for culinary school when I paid for it myself, working 3 jobs? I have all my receipts, my payment records, everything. Ryan's eye twitched a tell from childhood when he was lying. You asked me to structure it as loans for tax purposes. You were quite clever about it, actually. Said it would help you with deductions. And the supposed loan for my bakery down payment. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through it casually. The down payment that came from Mom's life insurance policy, the one you told me was all she had besides the house. Life insurance. Madison's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose. Ryan, you said your mother left everything to charity except the family home. She's confused, Ryan said quickly, shooting Madison a look that could have curdled milk. Liza's always been a bit creative with her memories. Steinberg began pulling out more documents. Ms. Winters, regardless of your interpretation of events, these loan documents are legally binding. You have 2 options. 1, repay the full amount immediately, or 2, sign this power of attorney giving your brother control of your assets, including your bakery and its building, to satisfy the debt. And if I refuse both options? I asked, already knowing the answer. Then we file suit tomorrow morning, Steinberg replied. Criminal charges for fraud, civil action for breach of contract. Your bakery will be seized, your accounts frozen. You'll spend years in court and likely end up in prison. The other diners in the main restaurant had no idea what was happening in this private room. Waiters passed by the closed doors carrying trays of beautiful food to happy customers. The normalcy of it all made this nightmare feel even more surreal. I noticed one of the waiters lingering near our door longer than necessary, and when I caught his eye through the glass, he gave an almost imperceptible nod before moving on. Ryan, I said softly, do you remember what Mom used to say about family, how we should protect each other, always have each other's backs? Mom was naive, Ryan replied. The world doesn't work on sentiment, it works on contracts and power. You've had 2 years to make something of yourself with that bakery, and what do you have to show for it? A failing business and mounting debts. My bakery isn't failing, I said, heat creeping into my voice. I'm paying my bills, supporting myself, building something honest. Madison laughed, a tinkling sound like breaking champagne flutes. How honest is it to take $500,000 from your brother and pretend it never happened? I stared at her wearing my grandmother's necklace, the one Mom had promised would be mine on my wedding day. The diamonds caught the light, throwing tiny rainbows on the white tablecloth. That's a beautiful necklace, Madison. Where did you get it? Her hand flew to her throat. Ryan gave it to me, a family heirloom from his grandmother. He said there was no one else to wear it since his sister disappeared after their mother's death. Disappeared. I looked at Ryan, who had gone pale. Is that what you told people, that I disappeared? You cut yourself off from everyone, he said quickly. Refused to return calls, changed your number. You told me to change my number because of the supposed creditors harassing me about Mom's medical bills, I reminded him. Bills that you said you'd handle as executor. My phone buzzed again, another message that made me smile despite the gravity of the situation. I glanced toward the door, then back at my brother. You know what, Ryan? You're right. Let's settle this like adults, but first, I'd like you to meet someone. The door to our private dining room opened with quiet authority, and Detective Sarah Coleman walked in like she owned the place. Her presence immediately changed the atmosphere in the room, even though she wore a simple gray pantsuit that could have belonged to any business professional. It was something in her bearing, the way her eyes swept the room and cataloged every detail, every person, every document on the table. Behind her, FBI Special Agent Marcus Thompson filled the doorway, his credentials already visible on his belt. "Good evening," Detective Coleman said pleasantly, though her smile was sharp as a blade. "I apologize for interrupting your dinner, but I believe we have some urgent business to discuss." Ryan's face went through a spectacular range of emotions in the span of 3 seconds: confusion, recognition, fear, and then a desperate attempt at composure. "I'm sorry, but this is a private family matter. If you could please—" "Mr. Ryan Winters." Coleman stepped further into the room, and I noticed how the three lawyers all seemed to shrink back in their chairs. "I'm Detective Coleman with the Financial Crimes Division, and this is Special Agent Thompson from the FBI. We have some questions regarding your financial activities over the past 2 years. Steinberg shot to his feet, papers scattering. "This is highly inappropriate. We're in the middle of a legitimate business meeting. If you have questions for my client, you can schedule an appointment through proper channels." "Actually," Agent Thompson said, his deep voice filling the room, "we have a federal warrant for Mr. Winters' arrest on charges of interstate fraud, forgery, and racketeering. We also have warrants to seize all documents present at this meeting as evidence." Madison's perfectly composed face cracked like an ice sculpture in July. "Arrest Ryan! What are they talking about?" She stood clutching her designer purse like a life preserver. "This is insane! Do you know who my father is?" "Ms. Worthington, we're aware of your father's position," Coleman said calmly. "We suggest you remain seated. You're not under arrest at this time, but you may be considered a material witness." "Material witness to what?" Morrison demanded, though his voice had lost its earlier predatory confidence. "We're simply mediating a family financial dispute." "Is that what you call forging loan documents?" Coleman pulled out her phone and showed something on the screen to Steinberg. "Or did you think we wouldn't notice that all these supposed loans were witnessed by the same notary who lost her license 3 years ago for fraud?" The blood drained from Steinberg's face so fast I thought he might faint. We relied on documentation provided by our client. We had no knowledge of any irregularities." "Ryan," I said, surprising myself with how calm my voice sounded, "remember when you came to my apartment this morning? You seemed so confident about tonight. What was it you said about Mom's trust fund?" His eyes widened with pure panic. I didn't come to your apartment. You're making things up." "The one you've been hiding for 2 years," I continued as if he hadn't spoken. "The $2.8 million you stole by forging documents and impersonating me to the trustees." "Trust fund." Madison's voice rose an octave. "You told me your family had nothing but the house. You said your mother died in debt." Coleman smiled, a predator recognizing prey. "Mr. Winters, would you like to explain the 17 offshore accounts you've opened in the past 18 months? Or should we start with the falsified death certificate you tried to file for your sister 6 months ago?" "Whoa, what?" I gasped, genuinely shocked. This wasn't part of what Marcus Webb had uncovered. "You tried to declare me dead." "It was rejected, obviously," Thompson added. "Turns out it's hard to declare someone dead when they're actively running a business and paying taxes. But it did flag our system for potential inheritance fraud." Watts, the third lawyer who'd been silent until now, suddenly spoke up. "I need to excuse myself. I'm not feeling well." She started to stand, but Coleman's look stopped her cold. "I'm afraid no one's leaving until we've collected all the evidence and taken statements," Coleman said. "We have agents stationed outside, and this restaurant is fully cooperating with our investigation." Ryan's carefully constructed composure finally shattered completely. "You set me up," he snarled at me. "This whole thing pretending to be weak, running that pathetic bakery. You've been planning this." "Planning what, Ryan?" I asked. Planning to discover you stole my inheritance. Planning to find out you've been telling everyone I abandoned the family. Planning to learn you tried to have me declared dead. I want a lawyer, Ryan said. You have three, Thompson observed dryly, though from what we've uncovered about Steinberg, Morrison, and Watts, they might need lawyers of their own soon. Steinberg's phone buzzed and his face went ashen as he read the message. They're raiding the office, he whispered. Federal agents are at the firm right now. That's impossible, Morrison protested. We've done nothing wrong. Our firm has operated for 30 years without a single investigation that stuck, Coleman finished. But then you've never been sloppy enough to leave this much evidence before. These forged loan documents, amateur hour. We have the real signatures for comparison. The forensic analyst you claimed authenticated them. He doesn't exist. I watched the scene unfold like a movie I'd seen before in a dream. The worst part was seeing Ryan's mask completely fall away, revealing someone I'd never really known. My brother, the one who taught me to ride a bike, who stayed up with me when I had nightmares, who promised at Mom's funeral that we'd always be there for each other. That person had never really existed. The FBI has been monitoring your activities for 3 months, Thompson explained, pulling out official documents. When you started moving money through interstate commerce to fund your lifestyle and this wedding, you made it a federal case. Add in the mail fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy charges, and you're looking at significant time. Madison slumped in her chair, the diamonds at her throat catching the light one last time. I need to call my father, she said weakly. By all means, Coleman agreed. But first, we'll need that necklace as evidence. It was reported stolen from the estate of Margaret Winters 2 years ago. Stolen. Madison's hand flew to her throat. Ryan gave this to me. He said it was rightfully his to give. Like the ring on your finger purchased with stolen funds, Coleman asked. Or the apartment he bought you with money from his mother's trust. The reality of her situation finally hit Madison in full force. She'd been preparing to marry a criminal, had been accepting stolen gifts, living a life funded by theft. Her father's political career would be tainted by association. The society wedding of the year would become the scandal of the decade. As Thompson began reading Ryan his rights, I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and sorrow. This wasn't how I'd wanted things to end. In my dreams, my brother would have confessed, apologized, made amends. We would have found a way back to being family. But sometimes, justice comes with a price of its own. The revelation of what happened earlier that day came out in pieces like a puzzle Detective Coleman was assembling for everyone in the room. She pulled out a small digital recorder and set it on the table among the scattered fraudulent documents. Ryan's eyes fixed on it like it was a venomous snake ready to strike. Asiya, 2 hours before this dinner. Coleman began, her voice carrying the weight of authority. Mr. Winters made an unscheduled visit to his sister's apartment. He believed her security system was malfunctioning because she'd mentioned issues with her doorbell camera last week. I nodded slowly, remembering the performance I'd given complaining to my neighbor Mrs. Chen loudly enough for anyone listening to hear about my broken camera. He showed up at 4:30. I was getting ready for tonight. What Ms. Winters didn't tell her brother, Thompson continued picking up the narrative, was that the FBI's technical team had installed recording equipment throughout her apartment 3 days ago. We've been building this case carefully, and we needed concrete evidence of his intentions. Ryan's face had gone from pale to a sickly green color. That's entrapment. You can't use anything recorded without my knowledge. Actually, Coleman smiled, we can. You entered private property with intent to commit a crime. The recording equipment was placed with Ms. Winters' full consent and a federal judge's approval. Would you like to hear what you said? Before anyone could object, she pressed play. Ryan's voice filled the room, clear and unmistakable despite the slight static of the recording. You stupid little girl, the recorded Ryan sneered. Did you really think I'd let you keep pretending you don't know about mom's money? 2.8 million, Liza? Million? And you're playing Baker while I'm trying to build a real life. My recorded voice responded shaky but determined. It was mom's money, Ryan. She wanted us to share it equally. You know that. Mom was a fool, the recording continued. Ryan's voice grew harder, meaner. Sitting on all that wealth while we lived like middle-class nobodies. Do you know how embarrassing it was in college watching trust fund kids throw money around while I had to work summers? So you stole it? I took what should have been mine anyway. I'm the oldest. I stayed with her when she was sick. You ran off to your little cooking dreams while I dealt with doctors and medications and watching her fade away. There was a pause in the recording, the sound of footsteps pacing. Then Ryan's voice returned lower and more menacing. Here's what's going to happen, little sister. Tonight you're going to sign whatever papers I put in front of you. You're going to smile and nod and play the grateful little girl who's happy to have her big brother taking care of her. And if I don't, a sound like a fist hitting a wall made everyone in the room flinch. Then things get very bad for you, your bakery. I know people who can make health inspectors find violations that don't exist. Your apartment. Funny how fires start in old buildings. Your reputation. One word to the right people and suddenly everyone knows you're a thief who stole from her dying mother. Madison gasped audibly at this version of her fiancé, the mask finally stripped away completely. The lawyers exchanged worried glances, calculating their own exposure to criminal conspiracy. The recording continued. But that's just the beginning, Liza. See, I've been moving mom's money around, making some investments. Some of those investments involve people who don't accept losses gracefully. If I don't have access to your share to cover what I owe, well, let's just say they'll be very interested to know I have a sister with assets. You're threatening me with your gambling debts. My recorded voice was stronger now, angrier. You stole our inheritance to gamble. Investment opportunities, Ryan corrected with a laugh that sounded slightly unhinged. High risk, high reward. Except the rewards haven't materialized yet, and the people I owe don't care about market fluctuations. So you see, signing those papers tonight isn't just about making me whole, it's about keeping you safe. Ryan, my voice on the recording turned pleading. We can fix this. We can go to the police together, explain everything. Maybe they'll be lenient if you cooperate. The sound of Ryan's laughter was chilling. The police! Oh, Liza, sweet, naive Liza. I've spent 2 years creating a paper trail that shows you already got your share and wasted it. Falsified bank records, forged signatures, witness testimonies from people you've never met, swearing they saw you gambling in Atlantic City doing drugs, making bad investments. If this goes to the police, you're the one who will end up in jail. You're insane. I'm practical, and I'm done playing games. Tonight you sign, or by next week you won't have a bakery, a home, or a reputation left. And if you're really stubborn, well, Mom's death was very convenient for me. Natural causes, the doctors said. Heart failure from her condition. But you know what's interesting about certain medications? Give someone too much over time, and it looks exactly like natural heart failure. The recording picked up my sharp intake of breath, the sound of something glass breaking. Ryan, tell me you didn't hurt Mom. I helped her. Ryan's voice had gone cold and clinical. She was suffering, holding on to all that money while we watched her waste away. I just accelerated the inevitable, made sure she went peacefully in her sleep. Really, I did her a favor, and I'll do you the same favor if you force my hand. Coleman stopped the recording there. The silence in the room was deafening. Madison had tears streaming down her perfectly made-up face. The 3 lawyers sat frozen, realizing they'd been party to something far worse than financial fraud. Ryan himself seemed to have shrunk, his bravado completely evaporated, as his own words condemned him. "No, there's more," Coleman said quietly. "Another 20 minutes where Mr. Winters details exactly how he forged documents, which offshore accounts he used, and his plans for after the wedding. But I think we've heard enough for now." "He killed her," I whispered. Even though I'd heard it hours ago, the reality still felt fresh and raw. He killed our mother. We've requested exhumation and toxicology testing, Thompson confirmed. With this confession and the evidence we've gathered, we're adding murder charges to the federal indictment. Steinberg finally found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a croak. We had no knowledge of any murder. Our firm was simply hired to mediate a financial dispute. Your firm, Coleman turned her attention to the lawyers, has some serious questions to answer. These forged loan documents bear your letterhead. The notary who supposedly witnessed them worked for your firm before losing her license. And Mr. Morrison here, he's been making some interesting deposits that match withdrawals from Mr. Winters' accounts. Morrison started to protest, but Watts cut him off. I want to make a deal, she said suddenly. I've only been with the firm 6 months. I have information about their other clients, other schemes. I'll testify in exchange for immunity. Oh, shut up, Helen, Steinberg snarled, but the damage was done. Actually, Thompson smiled, Ms. Watts has already been cooperating with us for the past 3 months. She came to us when she discovered what your firm was really doing. She's been wearing a wire to every meeting. The look of betrayal on Steinberg's face was almost comical. He'd been undermined by his own associate, just as Ryan had betrayed me. There was a poetic justice to it that wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Madison suddenly stood yanking the necklace from her throat and throwing it on the table. I want out, she declared. I knew nothing about any of this. Ryan told me his family was wealthy, that he'd inherited legitimately. I never questioned where the money came from. Sit down, Madison, Ryan said, his voice flat and defeated. It's over. No. She backed away from the table from him. I'm Senator Worthington's daughter. I don't associate with murderers and thieves. This engagement is over. I'll return everything you gave me through my lawyer. Everything he gave you was purchased with stolen money, Coleman reminded her. It's all evidence now, but we'll note your cooperation in our report. As the full weight of his situation settled on Ryan's shoulders, I saw something break in his eyes. The brother I'd grown up with, the one I'd tried to find glimpses of even in recent years, was truly gone. Maybe he'd never existed at all outside my own need to believe in family bonds that were more fiction than fact. The restaurant staff had quietly cleared the main dining room, giving law enforcement space to work. Through the windows, I could see patrol cars with their lights flashing, FBI vehicles blocking the exits. What was supposed to be my humiliation had become Ryan's complete downfall, and all because he couldn't resist coming to threaten me one more time, to gloat about his cleverness and cruelty. The scene in the restaurant had devolved into controlled chaos, with FBI agents cataloging evidence and taking preliminary statements. That's when Patricia Chen walked through the door, her presence commanding attention despite her slight frame. She moved with the confidence of someone who'd waited years for this moment, her silver hair gleaming under the crystal chandeliers. Hello, Ryan, she said, her voice carrying the weight of suppressed anger. I believe it's time we discussed your mother's real wishes. Ryan, already handcuffed and flanked by agents, looked at Patricia with dawning recognition and fresh fear. You were supposed to be in Africa. Mom said you were doing humanitarian work indefinitely. Your mother said no such thing, Patricia replied coolly. You told everyone that after intercepting my letters and emails, but I've been back for 6 months working with Liza and the authorities to expose what you've done. Detective Coleman gestured for Patricia to continue, clearly having coordinated this revelation. Patricia reached into her leather portfolio and withdrew a set of documents that made the lawyers lean forward despite themselves. 6 months ago, Patricia began, Liza's bakery was on the verge of closing. She'd been struggling to make ends meet, working 18-hour days, taking any catering job she could find. The industrial oven broke down, the rent was overdue, and she was 3 days away from shuttering the only thing she had left of her dreams. I remembered those dark days vividly. I'd been surviving on leftover pastries and coffee, too proud to ask anyone for help, too ashamed to admit how badly I was failing. The morning Patricia walked in, I'd been calculating whether I had enough flour to fill the last orders before closing forever. An anonymous investor suddenly appeared. Patricia continued offering $50,000 to save the bakery. No strings attached, no repayment schedule, just a simple investment in a woman who deserved better than what life had given her. "Let me guess," Ryan said bitterly, "that investor was you." "Of course it was me," Patricia confirmed. "Your mother was my closest friend for 30 years. We met when she was still an investigative journalist before she married your father and chose to focus on raising you two. She would have been horrified to see Liza suffering while you lived like a king on stolen money." Thompson pulled up something on his tablet. "Our investigation shows that Ms. Chen didn't just save the bakery out of kindness. She suspected something was wrong with the estate distribution from the beginning." Patricia nodded. "Margaret called me 2 months before she died. She was worried about Ryan, about his gambling, his debts, his increasingly aggressive attempts to get her to sign papers. She told me about the trust fund, made me promise to look after Liza if anything happened to her." "You're lying," Ryan insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. "Mom trusted me completely." "Your mother loved you," Patricia said sadly, "but she didn't trust you. Not after you stole from the Hendersons during their funeral reception. Not after you embezzled from your first job out of college. Not after she had to pay back your gambling debts 3 separate times to keep you out of jail." Madison, who'd been trying to inch toward the door, froze. "Funeral reception you stole from grieving people." "The Hendersons were Mom's bridge partners," I said, the memory clicking into place. "Their son died in Afghanistan. Mom organized the reception at our house, and afterward, Mrs. Henderson's purse was missing along with several memorial donation envelopes, which Margaret quietly replaced from her own funds," Patricia added. "Just like she covered for you when you stole from the church fundraiser, the school athletics department, and half a dozen other places. She spent years cleaning up your messes, Ryan, but she drew the line at letting you steal from your sister." Patricia pulled out another document, this one in a sealed envelope marked with our mother's handwriting. "This is why I really invested in the bakery. Margaret gave me this letter 3 weeks before she died with very specific instructions." Coleman took the envelope, examining the seals and signatures before carefully opening it. As she read, her eyebrows rose progressively higher. "This is a codicil to her will," she announced, "witness notarized and completely legal." "That's impossible," Steinberg interrupted. "I've seen the will. I reviewed it myself when preparing Mr. Winters's case." "You saw the will Ryan provided," Patricia corrected, "not the complete document. Margaret was thorough. She knew Ryan had access to her papers, so she kept the most important parts elsewhere. This codicil specifically states that if the executor of her estate commits any form of fraud or theft, all powers immediately transfer to the secondary beneficiary." "Which would be?" Coleman asked, though her smile suggested she already knew. "Liza Margaret Winters," Patricia read from the document, "with Patricia Chen as oversight trustee until such time as the fraud is exposed and prosecuted." Ryan's face contorted with rage. "You planned this together. You've been setting me up from the beginning." "No, Ryan," I said quietly. "Mom set this up. She knew what you were capable of, and she protected me even after death. Patricia just honored her wishes." Patricia wasn't finished. She pulled out a small key and held it up. "This opens a safety deposit box at First National Downtown Branch. Your mother rented it 20 years ago and paid for it through 2030. Inside are her complete journals documenting every theft you committed, every debt she covered, every lie she caught you in. She also kept copies of the real trust documents, investment statements, and correspondence with the trustees." More importantly," Thompson interjected, "those journals detail Ryan's escalating behavior in the months before Margaret's death. Increased pressure for money, suspicious interest in her medications, and several instances where she felt unsafe in her own home." "She was paranoid," Ryan protested weakly. "The medications made her confused." The medications you were in charge of administering, Coleman noted, the same medications our toxicology experts are very interested in examining once we exhume her body. Patricia approached the table where I sat, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. Your mother loved you so much, Liza. She told me she saw herself in you, the determination, the creativity, the honest heart. The bakery building you're leasing, she bought it 15 years ago through a shell company. She's been your landlord all along, making sure you'd always have a place to pursue your dreams. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. All those times I'd thanked my lucky stars for finding such an affordable lease in a perfect location, it had been Mom watching over me. Even the name of the management company, Guardian Angels LLC, made sense now. Of course, the $50,000 I invested, Patricia continued, was just a bridge loan until we could expose Ryan and recover your rightful inheritance. Your mother set aside a separate fund specifically for your bakery outside the main trust. She wanted to make sure you'd be okay no matter what Ryan did. This is entrapment, Morrison said desperately. You manipulated my client into committing crimes. Your client, Coleman said dryly, committed crimes long before anyone started documenting them. We simply gave him enough rope to hang himself. And speaking of your client's crimes, let's discuss your firm's role in laundering money through fake legal settlements. As if on cue, Thompson's phone buzzed. He answered, listened briefly, then smiled. That was the raid team at your offices, Mr. Steinberg. They've found some very interesting files. It seems Ryan Winters was small potatoes compared to your other clients. Want to tell us about your connections to the Kozlov crime family? Steinberg went pale as paper. Morrison started hyperventilating. Watts sat calmly, occasionally making notes that she passed to the FBI agents. The firm that had seemed so intimidating an hour ago was crumbling like a house of cards in a hurricane. The best part, Patricia said, returning her attention to Ryan, is that your mother predicted all of this. In her letter, she wrote that your greed would eventually destroy you, that you'd align yourself with criminals and end up in prison. She said the saddest day of her life was realizing her son had chosen money over family. She didn't understand, Ryan said, his voice breaking. I deserved more. I was the one who stayed. I was the one who sacrificed. You stayed to steal, I said, finding my voice at last. You sacrificed our mother's life for money. And in the end, what do you have to show for it? A fiancé who's abandoning you lawyers, who'll turn on you to save themselves, and a prison cell waiting. Madison had successfully edged to the door where an FBI agent stood guard. I need to leave, she pleaded. My father's expecting me. This has nothing to do with me. Actually, Coleman produced another document. It does. These receipts show you knowingly accepted stolen property. This text message thread shows you discussing with Ryan how to hide assets. And this sworn statement from a jeweler says you specifically requested items be purchased with cash to avoid leaving a paper trail. The senator's daughter crumpled into a chair, her perfect composure finally shattered completely. The woman who'd walked in wearing my grandmother's diamonds and sneering at my simple dress was reduced to tears and smeared mascara, facing the reality that her greed had destroyed her future as thoroughly as Ryan's had destroyed his. Madison Worthington's tears dried up as suddenly as they'd started, and when she raised her head, her eyes held a calculating gleam that made everyone in the room tense. She dabbed at her face with a handkerchief, smearing her makeup further, then let out a laugh that was anything but hysterical. It was cold, deliberate, and utterly controlled. You all think I'm some vapid socialite who got caught up in this mess, she said, her voice dropping the cultured sweetness she'd maintained all evening. Poor little Madison, the senator's daughter who fell for a con man. How perfectly tragic. She stood with fluid grace, no longer the wilting flower she'd portrayed moments ago. Let me tell you something about growing up in politics. You learn early that everyone's running a con, and the trick is to run a better one than the person trying to con you. Ryan stared at her as if seeing a stranger. Madison, what are you talking about? My name, she said with a smile sharp enough to cut glass, isn't Madison. It's Jennifer Walsh, and I've been playing this role for 14 months. Madison Worthington exists only on paper, a carefully crafted identity, complete with family connections and a conveniently absent senator father who's always traveling. Coleman and Thompson exchanged glances, their hands moving subtly toward their weapons. This was an unexpected development that changed the entire dynamic of the room. I recognized you for what you were the moment we met at that charity gala. Jennifer continued prowling around the table like a predator, finally showing its true nature. The expensive suit that didn't quite fit, right? The desperate networking, the way you kept steering conversations toward money. I've made a career out of identifying marks like you. You're a con artist. I breathed, almost admiring the revelation despite everything. I prefer wealth redistribution specialist, Jennifer corrected with a wink. I target men who've stolen or inherited wealth they don't deserve. Marriage is such a lovely legal way to ensure financial security, especially when you gather enough evidence to guarantee a favorable divorce settlement. She pulled out her phone, scrolling through files with practiced ease. I've been recording Ryan for months. Every confession, every drunken boast about outsmarting his sister, every meeting with shady financial advisors. My particular favorite is from last month when he detailed exactly how he forged the trust documents. Ryan lunged forward, but the FBI agents restrained him. You recorded me. In private conversations, that's illegal. So is murder and fraud, darling, Jennifer replied sweetly. But legality aside, I'm sure the FBI would be very interested in these recordings, particularly the one where you discuss moving money through accounts connected to international trafficking operations. Thompson's attention sharpened. You have evidence of trafficking connections. Oh, I have so much more than that, Jennifer said, clearly enjoying herself now. See, Ryan thought he was being clever, using offshore accounts, but he didn't realize those accounts were honeypots set up by the Demirov syndicate. They let amateur criminals deposit money, charge exorbitant fees, then threaten exposure unless more money flows in. It's a beautiful scam, really. You knew about the syndicate. Ryan's voice cracked with panic. Knew about them, darling. I've worked with them before. Not by choice, mind you. A few years ago, I tried to con the wrong mark and ended up owing them a substantial sum. They gave me a choice work for them, identifying new victims or end up in several pieces scattered across the eastern seaboard. Coleman pulled out a tablet, typing rapidly. Jennifer Walsh, here we are. Wanted for questioning in 3 states, suspected of fraud, identity theft, and witness in the Marchetti case? Cans? Jennifer smiled. That would be me. Though you'll find I was granted immunity in exchange for my testimony. Vincent Marchetti is serving 25 to life because of information I provided. The FBI was so grateful they agreed to look the other way regarding my entrepreneurial activities, as long as I only targeted criminals. You're an informant, Steinberg sputtered. Occasional consultant, Jennifer corrected. I have a very specific skill set that law enforcement finds useful. When Agent Thompson here started investigating Ryan 6 months ago, who do you think pointed him in the right direction? Thompson's poker face cracked slightly, confirming her words. This entire operation had layers within layers, schemes within schemes. The Demirov syndicate doesn't know I'm feeding information to the FBI, Jennifer continued. They think I'm still finding marks for them. Ryan was supposed to be my biggest score, yet a multi-million-dollar theft they could sink their claws into. Instead, I've been documenting their entire operation through him. She produced a small external drive from her purse. Financial records, coded communications names of other victims, money laundering routes, even some interesting photographs of syndicate members meeting with supposedly legitimate businessmen, all gathered while playing the devoted fiancé to a murderous fool. This is insane, Ryan said weakly. You said you loved me. We were planning a life together. Jennifer's laugh was genuine this time. Oh, Ryan, you really bought that. The breathless admiration, the wide-eyed wonder at your supposed business acumen. I've played Juliet to darker Romeos than you. At least you never tried to have me killed, which puts you ahead of my last two marks. She turned to me and her expression softened slightly. I owe you an apology, Liza. When I started this, you were just collateral damage in my plan. But watching you these past months, seeing how you struggled while your brother lived off your inheritance, it reminded me why I got into this game in the first place. Which was, I asked, genuinely curious despite everything. My older brother stole my college fund to feed his cocaine habit, she said simply. My parents believed his lies wrote me off as the troubled child. I spent years on the streets, learned to survive by becoming someone else, anyone else. Eventually, I got good enough to turn the tables on people like him, and like Ryan. She handed the drive to Thompson. Everything's encrypted, but I'll provide the keys in exchange for a new identity and relocation. The Demirovs won't be happy when they learn I've burned them, and they have a long reach. We'll need to verify the intelligence first, Thompson said, but he handled the drive like it was made of gold. You'll find a folder labeled Winters, Jennifer added helpfully. It contains every crime Ryan confessed to, including a lovely video from 3 weeks ago where he demonstrated how he forged Liza's signature. He was quite proud of his technique. Morrison, who'd been silent through Jennifer's revelation, suddenly spoke up. If she's been recording privileged conversations, none of this is admissible. Attorney-client privilege doesn't apply when the attorney is part of the criminal conspiracy, Jennifer interrupted. There's a folder for your firm too, Mr. Morrison. You really shouldn't conduct illegal business at restaurant lunches. The acoustics at Chez Laurent are excellent for recording devices. Steinberg's face had progressed from pale to a concerning shade of purple. You little witch! Do you have any idea what you've done? The people we work with don't go to prison quietly. They'll come after everyone involved in this. Which is why I'll be on a plane to somewhere tropical within 48 hours, Jennifer said cheerfully. But don't worry, I'm sure federal protection will keep you safe. Prison can be very secure if you're in the right facility. Ryan had gone quiet, staring at Jennifer like she was an alien creature. In a way, she was. The woman he'd planned to marry had never existed. The life they'd built together was as fake as the loan documents he'd created. He'd been outconned by a professional, and the irony wasn't lost on anyone. The engagement ring, he said, finally, his voice hollow. You made me buy a 5-carat diamond. Said it had to be perfect. Which I'll be keeping as partial payment for my services to the FBI, Jennifer said. Consider it a consulting fee. Though, honestly, considering I saved you from the Demirovs' usual collection methods, you should thank me. They were planning to take your organs as payment if you couldn't cover what you owed. Take his organs, I gasped. The trafficking isn't just drugs and guns, Jennifer explained matter-of-factly. Black market organs are incredibly lucrative. Your brother was about 3 missed payments away from waking up in a bathtub full of ice, minus a kidney or 2. The room fell silent as the full implications of Ryan's choices became clear. He hadn't just stolen from family or committed fraud. He'd walked into a nightmare world of international crime, dragging everyone around him into danger. If Jennifer hadn't been playing her own game, if the FBI hadn't been watching the story, might have ended very differently. I need protection, Ryan said suddenly, real fear cracking through his anger. If the syndicate finds out I led the FBI to them, you should have thought of that before stealing from your sister, Coleman said without sympathy. But yes, you'll be placed in protective custody pending trial. Whether you stay protected depends on how cooperative you are. Jennifer glanced at her diamond-encrusted watch, another gift from Ryan bought with stolen money. Well, this has been delightful, but I have a plane to catch. Agent Thompson, I assume we can conclude our business quickly. I'd like to be in international waters before the Demirovs realize their communication network has been compromised. We'll need a full debrief first, Thompson said. Everything you know about their operations, names, dates, locations. Already prepared, she said, pulling another drive from her purse. I may be a con artist, but I'm a very organized one. This contains my insurance policy. Enough information to keep multiple crime syndicates busy fighting each other instead of looking for me." She turned back to Ryan one last time. "For what it's worth, you made it easy. Your ego, your greed, your complete lack of empathy for anyone but yourself. You never once suspected that someone might be playing you the way you played others. That's the thing about marks like you. You're so busy being predators, you never notice when you become prey." Agent Thompson's phone buzzed insistently, and the expression on his face as he answered made everyone in the room hold their breath. He listened intently, occasionally muttering affirmatives, his frown deepening with each passing second. When he finally hung up the look he gave Ryan could have frozen hell itself. "That was our financial crimes unit," Thompson announced. "They've finished tracing the offshore accounts you've been using, Mr. Winters. It seems you've been even more foolish than we initially thought." Ryan, already pale from Jennifer's revelations, somehow managed to go even whiter. "What are you talking about? Those accounts are secure, encrypted, completely anonymous." "Anonymous to you, maybe," Thompson replied, "but not to the Demirov syndicate. Every single account you opened was pre-compromised. They've been monitoring every transaction, every transfer, every penny you thought you were hiding safely offshore." Coleman pulled up financial records on her tablet, showing them to the room. "The $18 million you transferred over the past year, the Demirovs have been charging you a 70% management fee. What you thought was $2.8 million in stolen inheritance is now worth less than $800,000. "Yun, that's impossible," Ryan protested. "I checked the balances last week. Everything was there." "The balances they showed you," Jennifer interjected with a knowing smile. "The Demirovs are excellent at creating fake banking interfaces. You see what they want you to see while they bleed you dry. It's actually quite elegant in its simplicity." Thompson continued reading from his notes. "According to our intelligence, you currently owe the syndicate $2.1 million in additional fees, penalties, and interest. They've been patient because they believed you had access to more family money. Specifically, they thought you could tap into your sister's supposed share." The full horror of Ryan's situation was beginning to dawn on everyone. He hadn't just stolen from his family, he'd delivered himself into the hands of international criminals who were systematically destroying him. "The meeting you had last Tuesday at the Riverside Club," Coleman said, pulling up surveillance photos. "You thought you were meeting with investment advisors from Switzerland. Those men were Demirov enforcers. Mikhail Volkov, known for his creative collection methods, and Dmitry Sokolov, who's wanted in 12 countries for murder." Ryan's hands shook visibly. "They said they were from Zurich Financial Services. They had business cards, a website." "All fake," Jennifer confirmed. "The Demirovs maintain dozens of false front companies. They probably showed you impressive returns on investments that don't exist, promised you access to exclusive opportunities that were just money pits designed to drain desperate marks like you." A new voice entered the conversation as a door opened again. A man in an expensive suit walked in his bearing, suggesting authority despite his unremarkable appearance. He showed credentials to Coleman and Thompson, who both straightened noticeably. "Special Agent David Chen, Joint Task Force on International Organized Crime." He introduced himself. "I apologize for the dramatic entrance, but we've been monitoring this situation in real time. Mr. Winters, are you aware that 40 minutes ago the Demirov syndicate discovered their communication network had been compromised?" Ryan shook his head, mutely terror replacing every other emotion on his face. "They know about Ms. Walsh's recordings," Chen continued. "They know their financial network has been exposed, and they know you're the weak link that led to this exposure. Our intelligence suggests they've already dispatched collection teams to recover their losses." "Shh, collection teams." Madison's voice was small, scared. "What does that mean?" "It means," Chen said gravely, "that Mr. Winters has approximately 6 hours before very dangerous people come looking for their money. Money he no longer has access to from accounts that have been frozen by federal order." You have to protect me. Ryan begged, his earlier bravado completely evaporated. I'll tell you everything, testify against anyone you want. Just don't let them find me. Protection depends on cooperation, Thompson reminded him. Full disclosure about every crime, every contact, every transaction. No holding back to protect yourself or anyone else. Ryan nodded frantically. Yes, anything, but you don't understand what these people are capable of. They showed me pictures of what happened to other people who couldn't pay. They keep people alive for days while they... We're aware of their methods. Chen cut him off, which is why time is critical. We need to move you to a secure facility immediately. But first, we need the real account numbers, not the fake ones they gave you. I have them, Ryan said quickly. In my phone encrypted. I'll give you everything. As Ryan fumbled with his phone trying to unlock it with shaking hands, Patricia spoke up. This is what greed brings you, Ryan. Your mother would be heartbroken to see what you've become, the danger you've brought to everyone around you. Don't lecture me about Mom, Ryan snapped, fear making him vicious. She sat on millions while we lived like ordinary people. She could have given us better lives, better opportunities. She gave you everything that mattered, I said quietly. Love, education, values. The money was meant to be a safety net, not a lifestyle, and you murdered her for it. I didn't mean... Ryan started, then stopped. It doesn't matter now. None of it matters if they find me. Chen's phone rang and his expression grew more serious as he listened. Understood. Implement immediately. He hung up and addressed the room. The Demirovs have accelerated their timeline. They've put a bounty on Mr. Winters. $500,000 to anyone who delivers him to them alive. $500,000, Morrison squeaked. For him? They want to make an example, Chen explained. Show other debtors what happens when someone exposes their operations. We're initiating emergency protocols. This restaurant is being evacuated, and we're establishing a security perimeter. Through the windows, more law enforcement vehicles were arriving, their lights creating a disco of red and blue against the restaurant's facade. What had started as a family dispute had escalated into an international incident. The irony, Jennifer observed checking her own phone, is that if Ryan had just shared the inheritance fairly with Liza, none of this would have happened. He'd be a millionaire living a comfortable life instead of running from the Russian mob. Belarusian, Chen corrected. The Demirovs are Belarusian, though they operate globally. And they're not just mob, they're a sophisticated criminal enterprise with connections to terrorism, human trafficking, and state-level corruption. Even better, Jennifer muttered. No wonder they were so interested when I dangled Ryan in front of them. A greedy American with stolen millions and no street smarts. He must have looked like Christmas morning. Ryan finally managed to unlock his phone, handing it to Thompson with trembling fingers. The app is disguised as a calculator. The password is my mother's birthday backwards. Everything's in there. Account numbers, transaction histories, contact information. Thompson immediately began extracting the data while Chen coordinated with other agents via radio. The urgency in the room was palpable, everyone aware that they were now racing against the clock, counting down to potential violence. We've identified 3 Demirov assets already in the city, Chen announced. Teams are moving to intercept, but we can't guarantee we've found them all. Mr. Winters, you'll be transported to a federal facility within the hour. For your own safety, you'll be held in solitary confinement until we can assess the full threat level. What about the rest of us? Steinberg demanded. If they're looking for him, they might come after anyone connected to him. Your law firm's connection to the Demirovs goes deeper than just Mr. Winters, Coleman said coldly. We have evidence of you facilitating money transfers for multiple syndicate operations. You're all under arrest and will be held in protective custody pending charges. The lawyers exchanged panicked looks, finally understanding that their decades of criminal activity had led them into waters far deeper and more dangerous than they'd ever imagined. They'd thought they were clever, working with white-collar criminals and keeping their hands technically clean. They never considered that their clients' connections might have tentacles reaching into the darkest corners of international crime. Liza should be protected too, Patricia insisted. If they think she has access to money, Ms. Winters will be offered protective services, Chen assured her, though our assessment suggests she's not a primary target. The Demirovs are focused on those who actively wronged them. She's a victim, not a collaborator. I felt a strange numbness settling over me. My brother had not only stolen my inheritance and murdered our mother, but had also potentially put my life in danger by associating with international criminals. The simple betrayal I thought I was confronting had turned into a nightmare beyond imagination. "The bakery," I said suddenly. "If they're looking for assets to seize—" "Already secured," Coleman assured me. "We have agents stationed there and at your apartment. Your employees have been notified of a temporary closure for your safety. We'll maintain security until the threat is neutralized." Ryan was led away first, surrounded by a phalanx of armed agents. He looked back once, meeting my eyes with an expression I couldn't read. Regret, fear, anger. Perhaps all three mixed with the dawning realization that his choices had led to complete destruction. The golden boy who'd always gotten his way, who'd killed our mother for money, was now going to spend his life looking over his shoulder, even in prison. After Ryan's removal and the lawyers being taken into custody, the room felt strangely empty, despite the remaining FBI agents and Patricia still being present. Detective Coleman had been reviewing evidence on her tablet when Patricia cleared her throat, drawing everyone's attention back to her leather portfolio. "There's one more thing," Patricia said, her voice carrying a weight that made everyone pause. "Something I've been holding until the right moment. Margaret knew this day might come, though I don't think even she imagined it would be this catastrophic." She withdrew an envelope from her portfolio, this one sealed with wax bearing our mother's personal seal, a small hummingbird she'd used on all her important correspondence. The envelope showed signs of age, but had been carefully preserved. "Your mother gave me this 3 months before she died," Patricia explained, handing it to Coleman. "She made me promise to only reveal it if Ryan committed what she called the ultimate betrayal. I think we can agree. We've reached that point." Coleman examined the envelope carefully, checking the seal and the date written across it in my mother's distinctive handwriting. "This has been notarized," she observed, "witnessed by Judge Helen Martinez and District Attorney Michael Torres." Margaret had connections from her journalism days, Patricia explained. When she suspected Ryan might be planning something, she made sure everything was done properly. She knew criminals often escape justice on technicalities, and she refused to let that happen. I stared at the envelope like it might bite me. After everything that had been revealed tonight, what more could there possibly be? What other secrets had Mom taken to her grave, only to reveal them from beyond? Coleman opened the envelope, carefully preserving it as evidence. Inside were several pages of my mother's handwriting and what appeared to be legal documents. As Coleman read, her expression grew increasingly serious. "This is a legal codicil to her will," Coleman announced, "but it's more than that. It's a full confession of Ryan's crimes dating back 20 years documented by his mother." She began to read aloud, and my mother's words filled the room like a ghost returning to testify. "I, Margaret Ann Winters, being of sound mind and body, do hereby make this statement under penalty of perjury. I write this with a heavy heart, but a clear conscience, knowing that the son I love may one day force me to protect my daughter from beyond the grave." Ryan's troubles began when he was 16. I've enclosed documentation of the following incidents, each of which I covered up to protect him to my eternal shame and regret. October 2019, Ryan stole $4,000 from the Hendersons' funeral memorial fund. I replaced the money and told no one. March 2020, Ryan embezzled $12,000 from his part-time job at Davidson Accounting. I paid them to not press charges. September 2020, Ryan broke into our neighbor's home and stole jewelry valued at $8,000. I bought it back through intermediaries and returned it anonymously. January 2021, Ryan attempted to poison our dog Max when I threatened to cut off his allowance. The veterinarian can confirm the toxicology report I've attached. The list goes on, each incident escalating in severity. I've documented everything, kept every receipt, every police report that was never filed, every victim I compensated to protect my son from consequences. In doing so, I created a monster who believes he can take whatever he wants without repercussion. Coleman paused, looking at me with sympathy. Did you know about any of this? I shook my head, feeling numb. Max died when I was in high school. Mom said it was cancer. I never questioned it. Patricia touched my hand gently. She protected you from the truth. Maybe too much. She thought she could save both her children, but she realized too late that Ryan was beyond redemption. Coleman continued reading. I write this letter because I fear for my life. Ryan has been asking questions about my will, about the trust fund he shouldn't know exists. He's been researching my medications, asking the pharmacy detailed questions about interactions and dosages. I've changed the locks twice after finding him in my room at night, standing over my bed, watching me sleep. If I die before my time, investigate my son. I've hidden evidence in 3 locations: my safety deposit box at First National Bank, a storage unit at Secure Space Facility on Maple Street, and with my dear friend Patricia Chen. The storage unit contains journals documenting 20 years of Ryan's escalating criminal behavior and my shameful enabling of it. The letter continued with detailed instructions about the trust fund protections for me and a personal message that made my eyes burn with unshed tears. To my darling Liza, if you're reading this, then I've failed to protect you in life. Please forgive me for keeping these secrets. I thought I was sparing you pain, but I see now that truth, however harsh, is better than living with lies. You were always the best of us. Kind, honest, hardworking. Every day I watched you build your life with integrity while your brother schemed and stole. The bakery building is yours, bought with money I earned from my writing career that Ryan never knew about. The trust fund is yours by right. But more than money, I leave you the truth and the legal means to claim justice. Don't let sentiment stop you from doing what's necessary. Ryan chose his path long ago, and it leads only to darkness. I've also enclosed evidence of his most serious crime, one I've carried alone for too long. 20 years ago, your father didn't die in an accident. The brake lines on his car were cut. I found Ryan's fingerprints on the brake fluid reservoir and his journal entry planning it, hidden in his room. I was pregnant with you, terrified, alone, and I made the cowardly choice to protect him instead of seeking justice for your father. The evidence is in the storage unit preserved all these years. I've been a coward, but you don't have to be. Use this to ensure Ryan never hurts anyone again. All my love, Mom. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the hardened FBI agents looked affected by the letter's contents. A mother documenting her son's crimes for 20 years, knowing he might kill her, preparing evidence to protect her daughter from beyond the grave. It was like something out of a crime novel, except it was my life. The storage unit, Thompson said, already pulling out his phone. We need to secure that immediately. I have the key, Patricia said, producing it from her purse. Margaret gave it to me with instructions to only access it if something happened to her. I've been paying the rental fees since her death, waiting for the right moment. Coleman stood, energy crackling around her. This changes everything. We're not just looking at recent fraud and theft. We're looking at a 20-year pattern of escalating violence culminating in patricide and matricide. Ryan Winters isn't just a white-collar criminal who got in over his head. He's a serial predator who's been enabled and protected until now. My father, I whispered, all these years I thought it was an accident. I grieved an accident that was actually murder. Your mother grieved too, Patricia said softly. She told me once that choosing between justice for your father and protecting you from growing up with a brother in prison was the hardest decision of her life. She chose you, always you. Agent Chen, who'd been coordinating security, looked up from his radio. We need to move on that storage unit now. If the Demirovs learn about additional evidence, they might try to destroy it to protect their own interests. They don't want their money launderers' full history exposed in court. I'm coming with you, I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. That's not advisable. Coleman started, but I cut her off. That's 20 years of my Ameli's secrets in that unit. 20 years of evidence about my father's murder, my mother's death. I need to see it. I need to understand how it all went so wrong. Patricia squeezed my hand. Your mother would be proud. She always said you had steel in your spine when it mattered. Coleman considered for a moment, then nodded. You can come, but you stay with agents at all times. This is now a crime scene, and we don't know if Ryan might have disclosed the location to anyone else. As we prepared to leave, Jennifer Walsh made one final appearance, escorted by 2 agents. She'd changed clothes somehow, now wearing simple jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back, looking nothing like the sophisticated Madison Worthington who'd walked in earlier. Liza, she said, approaching carefully, I wanted to apologize again before I disappear. Your brother was a mark to me, nothing more. But you're the real deal. The way you've handled tonight, finding out your entire life was built on lies and crimes, and you're still standing. That takes guts. Where will you go? I asked, curious, despite everything. She smiled. Somewhere warm where extradition is complicated. But first, I'm finishing my testimony against the Demirovs. Your brother might be scum, but the syndicate is worse. They've destroyed hundreds of families. Thanks to his stupidity and my recordings, we might actually take them down. Ms. Walsh needs to leave now, Chen said firmly. We have a narrow window to get her to safety. Jennifer nodded, then did something unexpected. She hugged me quickly, whispering in my ear, Check the freezer in your bakery. I left you something that belongs to you. Before I could ask what she meant, she was gone, whisked away by federal agents to start a new life under a new name in a place where even the Demirov syndicate couldn't reach her. I wondered if she'd ever find peace, or if she'd spend her life running from both her past and the enemies she'd made bringing down criminals. The convoy of federal vehicles moved through the city streets with practiced efficiency, heading toward the storage facility. I sat in the back of an armored SUV between Detective Coleman and Agent Thompson, watching the familiar streets pass by through tinted windows. Patricia followed in another vehicle with Agent Chen and additional security. The facility is about 10 minutes out, Thompson informed us, checking his tablet. Our advanced team is already securing the perimeter. Once we're there, you'll need to stay close and follow our lead exactly. I nodded, my mind still reeling from my mother's letter. 20 years of secrets. 20 years of covering for Ryan's crimes, 20 years of living with the knowledge that her son had murdered her husband. How had she carried that weight while still being the loving, supportive mother I remembered? Coleman's radio crackled to life. Unit 4 to lead. We have an unknown vehicle approaching from the east. Black Mercedes diplomatic plates. Diplomatic plates, Thompson muttered. That's not good. Our driver suddenly accelerated, taking a sharp turn that pressed me against the door. Behind us, I could hear sirens as our escort adjusted formation. Coleman was already on her phone, speaking rapidly to someone in authority. We might have a problem, she said after hanging up. Those diplomatic plates are registered to the Belarusian Trade Commission. It could be legitimate or it could be Demirov assets using diplomatic cover. Thompson finished grimly. They move faster than we anticipated. The radio came alive again. Unit 4 to lead. Vehicle is maintaining distance, but definitely following. Should we intercept? Negative, Coleman responded. Maintain surveillance, but do not engage. We can't risk an international incident without confirmation of hostile intent. My heart was racing now. This was supposed to be a simple trip, to collect evidence, not a high-speed chase through city streets, with potential international criminals in pursuit. I thought of my quiet life at the bakery, the simple pleasure of creating pastries and serving coffee, and wondered if I'd ever get back to that normalcy. "There's something else," Thompson said, studying intelligence updates on his tablet. "Interpol just sent an alert. Dmitry Volkov entered the country 6 hours ago through Miami, private jet, diplomatic passport." The same Dmitry Volkov who Ryan thought was a Demirov enforcer. I asked, remembering the surveillance photos Coleman had shown earlier. "The very same," Thompson confirmed, "except he's not who anyone thought he was." Our convoy pulled into the storage facility's parking lot tires, screeching slightly on the turn. The advance team had already established a perimeter agents in tactical gear positioned at key points. The black Mercedes following us stopped at a distance, idling just outside the facility's gates. "Stay in the vehicle," Coleman ordered, but even as she spoke, the Mercedes' door opened. A man stepped out, tall and imposing, wearing an expensive suit that couldn't hide the dangerous way he moved. He raised his hands slowly, showing they were empty, and walked toward the gate where agents had weapons trained on him. "I am Dmitry Volkov," he called out in accented English. "Interpol Special Operations Division. I need to speak with Agent Thompson immediately." Thompson cursed under his breath. "This day just keeps getting better." He looked at Coleman. "Keep her here. I'll find out what this is about." Through the bulletproof windows, I watched Thompson approach the gate, his hand near his weapon. The two men spoke briefly, Volkov producing credentials that Thompson examined carefully. After a tense moment, Thompson stepped back and spoke into his radio. "It's legitimate," his voice came through the speakers. "He's Interpol deep cover for 2 years, says he has critical intelligence about an imminent threat." Coleman made the decision quickly. "Bring him in, full escort weapons ready, if this is a trick." But it wasn't a trick. Dmitry Volkov walked through the gate with the measured confidence of a man who'd spent years dancing between law enforcement and organized crime. Up close, I could see the weariness in his eyes, the toll that deep cover work takes on a person. "Ms. Winters," he said, nodding respectfully to me through the window. "I apologize for the dramatic entrance, but when I learned of tonight's events, I had to break cover immediately. The Demirov syndicate isn't just seeking money from your brother. They're cleaning house, eliminating everyone who might testify against them." "Including you?" Coleman asked as she stepped out of the vehicle, gesturing for me to stay put. "Especially me," Volkov confirmed. 2 years I've been building their trust, documenting their operations. Your brother's amateur theft accidentally exposed one of the largest money laundering operations in Eastern Europe. The syndicate blames him, but they also blame themselves for being careless. They're going to eliminate everyone connected to this breach. "How imminent is this threat?" Thompson demanded. Volkov checked his watch. "The kill teams were activated 4 hours ago. I've been feeding them false intelligence to buy time, but they'll realize soon that I've turned. We have maybe an hour before they move on all targets simultaneously." "At all targets?" I asked through the open door, unable to stay silent. Volkov's expression was grim. "Your brother, the lawyers, anyone who might have knowledge of their operations. They don't know yet about Ms. Walsh's recordings or your mother's evidence. But when they do, they'll come for the storage unit," Coleman finished. "Try to destroy any evidence that could be used against them in court." "Precisely," Volkov agreed. "Which is why we need to secure that evidence now and get everyone to safety. The diplomatic car that followed you, not mine. I came alone. That vehicle contains a Demirov assassination team waiting for confirmation of targets." The revelation sent a chill through everyone present. We were standing in a storage facility parking lot with potential killers watching from just beyond the gate. The federal agents' formation tightened, weapons now openly displayed. "Can you get us inside their communications?" Thompson asked Volkov. "Already done," Volkov replied, pulling out a modified phone. I'm receiving their encrypted messages in real time. They're waiting for final confirmation from Belarus before moving. The syndicate's leadership is debating whether to cut losses and run or try to eliminate witnesses first. Let's not give them time to decide, Coleman said decisively. We get the evidence and evacuate immediately. Volkov, you're with us. If you're really Interpol, you can help identify what's most critical to preserve. As we moved toward the storage facility's entrance, I noticed movement near the diplomatic vehicle. More figures were visible now, shadows behind tinted glass. The afternoon had given way to evening, and the gathering darkness made every shadow seem threatening. Unit be advised, a voice crackled over the radio. We have 2 more vehicles approaching from the north, no plates visible. It's starting, Volkov said quietly. They've made their decision. Those aren't reinforcements for us. Coleman grabbed my arm, pulling me along faster. We need to get inside now. Thompson, call for immediate backup. Everything we've got. The storage facility's manager, a nervous-looking man in his 50s, was waiting at the entrance with keys. His hands shook as he led us through corridors lined with identical units, the fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows. Unit 447, Patricia said, checking the key. Margaret paid for 10 years in advance cash. She wanted to make sure it would be waiting when needed. We reached the unit, a large corner space with reinforced walls. Patricia handed the key to Coleman, who inserted it carefully. The lock turned with a click that seemed to echo in the tense silence. Inside the unit was meticulously organized. Bankers' boxes lined the walls, each labeled with dates. Filing cabinets stood in neat rows. In the center sat a single desk with an envelope marked "Read First" in my mother's handwriting. My God, Thompson breathed. This isn't just evidence storage. This is a complete investigation archive. Volkov was already examining boxes, his trained eye identifying crucial evidence. Financial records going back decades. These correspond to known Demirov operations. Your mother was tracking them without realizing it, following money trails that led from your brother to international crime. I picked up the envelope from the desk, my hands trembling slightly. Inside was another letter shorter than the one Patricia had carried. If you're reading this, then Ryan has fallen completely into darkness, and the truth must come to light. Everything in this room documents not just his crimes, but the network of corruption he touched. I continued my journalism work in secret, following threads that began with covering up Ryan's thefts and led to something much larger. The red boxes contain evidence of his early crimes. The blue boxes document the financial networks he used. The green boxes, those are my insurance. They contain information about judges, police officials, and politicians who've been compromised. Some knowingly, some through Ryan's manipulation. I'm sorry to leave you this burden, Liza, but sunlight is the best disinfectant and these shadows have grown too dark to ignore. Now, love, Mom? She knew, I whispered. She knew it was bigger than just Ryan. Your mother was brilliant, Volkov said with genuine admiration. These records align perfectly with our intelligence. She inadvertently created a roadmap of syndicate operations spanning 20 years. Coleman's radio crackled urgently. Perimeter breach, multiple hostiles approaching from 3 directions. They're not trying to hide anymore. Through the thin walls of the storage unit, we could hear the sound of gunfire erupting outside. The Demirov syndicate had decided to move, and we were trapped in a storage facility with evidence that could bring down their entire operation. Barricade the door. Thompson ordered already moving filing cabinets. We hold this position until backup arrives. Volkov pulled out his phone, typing rapidly. I'm sending a message to Interpol headquarters. If something happens to us, at least they'll know what we found. I stood in the center of my mother's secret investigation room, surrounded by 20 years of carefully documented crimes, listening to the sounds of violence approaching. This morning, I'd been a baker, worried about making rent. Tonight, I was at the center of an international incident that had grown from my brother's greed into something that threatened to topple crime syndicates and expose corruption at the highest levels. The lights flickered as somewhere in the building power was being cut. In the growing darkness, I heard Coleman chamber a round in her weapon. "Whatever happens," she said quietly, "we protect the evidence and your mother's work won't be in vain." The sound of footsteps in the corridor outside grew closer, and I realized with crystal clarity that my mother's final gift to me wasn't just truth or justice. It was the chance to finish what she'd started. The storage unit had become our fortress boxes of evidence, forming makeshift barricades while federal agents took defensive positions. In the flickering, emergency lighting, Detective Coleman's phone rang with an urgency that cut through the chaos. She answered while keeping her weapon trained on the door. "Coleman here," she said tersely, then her face went through a series of expressions I couldn't quite read in the dim light. "You're certain DNA confirmation understood." She lowered the phone slowly, looking at me with something between sympathy and shock. "Liza, I need to tell you something. Our cold case unit just called. When we arrested Ryan, his fingerprints were run through the system as standard procedure." And I prompted, though something in her tone made me not want to hear the answer. "They matched prints found on your father's car from 20 years ago, specifically on the brake line assembly. The case was never properly investigated because it was ruled an accident, but the evidence was preserved." The storage unit suddenly felt very small. "My mother's letter said she found his prints." "There's more," Coleman continued gently. "The cold case detective pulled the original accident report. There were inconsistencies that should have triggered a homicide investigation. The brake lines weren't just worn or damaged, they were precisely cut. Professional job for a 16-year-old, but your brother was always precocious." Volkov looked up from the boxes he'd been examining. 16 years old and already committing murder. That's not normal criminal escalation. That's psychopathy. Patricia moved closer to me, her presence a small comfort in the nightmare unfolding. "Margaret told me once that Ryan had been different after your father's death. She thought it was grief, but now we know it was guilt," Thompson finished, "or more likely, the lack of it. Psychopaths often feel empowered by their first kill." Coleman's phone buzzed with incoming messages. She scrolled through them rapidly, her expression growing more disturbed. "The lab rushed the toxicology samples from your mother's exhumed remains. Preliminary results show massive levels of mercury administered over time. The pattern matches pharmaceutical-grade mercury, the kind used in certain medications when properly diluted." "Ryan had access to Mom's medications," I said numbly. "He was her caregiver." "The timeline matches his financial needs," Coleman explained. "Your mother's health declined rapidly in the 6 months before her death, coinciding with when Ryan started gambling heavily. He needed her dead to access the trust fund." A burst of gunfire outside reminded us that we had more immediate concerns than 20-year-old murderers. But Thompson held up his hand for silence, listening to his earpiece. "But backup is 3 minutes out," he reported. "But the Demirov team is already in the building. They're sweeping unit by unit." Volkov suddenly stiffened, staring at one of the boxes he'd opened. "This is impossible," he muttered, pulling out a photograph. "This woman, I know her." He showed us a picture of my mother from her journalism days, standing next to a man I didn't recognize. Both were holding press credentials at what looked like an international summit. "That's Viktor Demirov," Volkov said quietly, "the syndicate founder. This was taken in Prague, 1995. Your mother interviewed him before anyone knew what he really was." I stared at the photo, trying to reconcile the young, vibrant woman with the mother I'd known. She never mentioned covering international stories. "Look at these," Patricia said, having opened another box. She pulled out newspaper clippings, magazine articles, all with bylines I didn't recognize. Margaret Winters, M.A. Winston, Maggie Winter. She was using pseudonyms. Coleman quickly photographed the articles with her phone. These are all investigative pieces about emerging organized crime in Eastern Europe. Your mother wasn't just a journalist. She was tracking the birth of what would become the Demirov syndicate. Which means, Volkov said slowly, the syndicate might have known who she was. When Ryan started using their services, they would have run background checks. They would have discovered his mother was the journalist who first exposed their operations. The pieces were falling into place in a horrible pattern. They let Ryan think he was clever using their offshore accounts, but they were playing him from the beginning. More than that, Thompson realized, they were probably hoping to get to your mother's research through him. When she died, they thought the threat was eliminated. Until tonight, when everything exploded. The lights cut out completely, plunging us into darkness. Emergency lighting kicked in a second later, casting everything in an eerie red glow. In the distance, we could hear doors being kicked open, harsh voices speaking in what sounded like Russian or Belarusian. "They're 2 units away," Coleman whispered. "Everyone ready." But Volkov was still staring at the photographs, his face pale even in the red light. "There's something else. This man standing behind your mother in several photos. I've seen him before." He pulled out his phone, scrolling through files quickly. "Here, surveillance footage from last year. Same man, 30 years older, meeting with Ryan at a private club in Miami." "That's impossible," I protested. "Ryan didn't know anyone from Mom's journalism career." "Or he didn't know that he knew," Volkov corrected. "This man, Sergei Kozlov, was Viktor Demirov's right hand. He's now the syndicate's senior advisor. He's been grooming Ryan for 2 years, not for the money, but for revenge." The revelation hit like a physical blow. Ryan hadn't just stumbled into the syndicate's web. He'd been deliberately targeted because of who our mother was. His greed and criminality had made him the perfect weapon to use against our family. "Your mother exposed their early operations," Volkov explained rapidly. "Cost them millions in seized assets, dozens of arrests. Viktor Demirov swore vengeance before he died. His son Mikhail inherited that vendetta along with the syndicate." Coleman's radio crackled. "They're at the adjacent unit. Breaching charges detected." "So Ryan killing our parents?" I couldn't finish the sentence. "Ryan killed them for his own reasons," Patricia said firmly, "but the syndicate used his crimes for their purposes. They turned your mother's own son into the instrument of their revenge." A massive explosion shook the building, not at our door, further away. The sound of automatic weapons fire intensified. Our backup had arrived, engaging the Demirov team before they could reach us. "Federal agents, stand down." The shouted commands echoed through the facility. Thompson checked his radio. "SWAT is pushing them back. We need to evacuate now while they're distracted." But I couldn't move, staring at the boxes of evidence. 20 years of Mom investigating them. 20 years of Ryan's crimes. It's all connected. She was trying to bring them down, and they used her own son to kill her. "Which means this evidence is even more valuable than we thought," Coleman said urgently. "It's not just about Ryan anymore. Your mother's work could destroy the entire syndicate." Volkov was already grabbing boxes, prioritizing what to take. "The financial records, the photographs, the correspondence. We can't carry it all, but we need the core evidence." "There's a loading dock at the rear," the facility manager said, speaking for the first time in minutes. "Your people are already there with trucks." We moved quickly, each person carrying what they could. I found myself holding a box labeled 1995-1998 Prague years, feeling the weight of my mother's secret career. She'd been fighting these monsters before I was even born, and somehow that fight had echoed through decades to destroy our family. As we rushed through corridors, the sound of fighting grew more distant. The Demirov team was being pushed back, but they weren't giving up easily. These were professionals who knew failure meant death at their employer's hands. "Liza," Volkov said as we moved, "your brother may be evil, but he was also a victim. The syndicate identified him young, nurtured his worst impulses, guided him toward patricide and matricide. They created a weapon aimed at your mother even after her death." "That doesn't excuse what he did," I said. No, Volkov agreed, but it explains why the syndicate is so desperate now. Your mother's evidence combined with Ryan's testimony and my intelligence could unravel 25 years of operations. Billions in assets, hundreds of compromised officials, decades of murder and extortion, all exposed. We burst through the rear exit into a loading area filled with federal vehicles. Agents were creating a defensive perimeter, while others loaded evidence boxes into armored trucks. The night sky was lit up with searchlights and the flash of distant muzzle fire. Move, someone shouted. As I climbed into a vehicle, I took one last look at the storage facility. Somewhere in there, Demirov's soldiers were fighting desperately to destroy evidence my mother had spent 20 years collecting. Evidence she died to protect. Evidence that would finally bring justice for both my parents' murders. "Where are we going?" I asked Coleman as our convoy pulled out. "For federal courthouse," she replied. "It's a fortress. We'll secure the evidence and you until this is over." Will it ever be over? I wondered aloud. Ryan murdered our parents, the syndicate wants us dead, and apparently this has been brewing since before I was born. "Hey, it ends now," Coleman said firmly. "Your mother's work, Ryan's confession, Volkov's intelligence, Ms. Walsh's recordings. It's all coming together. The Demirov syndicate picked the wrong family to target." As we drove through the night, I thought about my mother. Not the gentle woman who taught me to bake and encouraged my dreams, but the investigative journalist who'd spent decades fighting international crime. She'd hidden that part of herself to protect me, but in the end, her work would bring justice. Ryan had killed her for money. The syndicate had orchestrated it for revenge. But Mom had planned for this, leaving a trail of evidence that would destroy them all. Her final story would be her greatest. The federal courthouse stood like a fortress in the night, its modern architecture hiding sophisticated security systems that made it nearly impregnable. As our convoy pulled into the underground garage, I could see Ryan being transferred from an armored vehicle surrounded by U.S. Marshals. Even from a distance, I could tell something was wrong. His movements were erratic, his head swiveling wildly as if seeing things that weren't there. "We need to keep them separated," Coleman instructed the marshals. "The sister stays in protective custody. The brother goes to interrogation." But as they tried to lead Ryan away, he suddenly erupted. "They're here. Don't you see them in the walls and the shadows? They're going to kill us all." The marshals struggled to restrain him as he thrashed wildly. His expensive suit was torn, his face streaked with sweat and what might have been tears. This wasn't the controlled, arrogant brother who'd tried to intimidate me hours ago. This was someone in complete psychological collapse. "Get medical in here," Thompson ordered. "He's having some kind of breakdown." "No!" Ryan screamed, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. "You don't understand. I killed them. I killed them both. Mom knew. She knew I was poisoning her, but she kept drinking the tea. She looked at me every morning and drank the tea." Everyone in the garage froze. Even the hardened federal agents looked shocked at the sudden confession. Coleman quickly activated her recorder while Thompson read Ryan his rights again, making sure everything was documented. "She knew," I whispered, feeling my knees go weak. Ryan's wild eyes found mine, and for a moment he seemed to recognize me. "Liza, little Liza, she protected you. Even while I was killing her, she made sure you were never alone with me, never ate my cooking, never drank what I offered. She knew." Patricia caught me as I swayed. The revelation that my mother had known she was being poisoned, but had continued to allow it rather than expose Ryan, was almost too much to bear. She'd chosen to die rather than see her son arrested for murder. "Mr. Winters." Coleman approached carefully. "Are you confessing to the murder of Margaret Winters?" "Mercury in her tea." Ryan laughed, the sound sharp and broken. "Every morning for 6 months. She got weaker and weaker, but she never said anything. Just looked at me with those sad eyes. Do you know what that's like? Watching your mother die, knowing she knows you're killing her?" "And your father?" Thompson pressed. "Did you kill Robert Winters?" Ryan's laughter turned to sobs. "I was 16. 16, he was going to divorce her, take half of everything. Grandma's inheritance would have been split. I couldn't let that happen. So I cut the brake lines, watched him drive away, knowing he'd never make it home." "Why," I found myself asking, "why did you do it?" Ryan's head snapped toward me, his eyes focusing with disturbing clarity. "Because I could. Because I was smarter than everyone else. Because money is power and power is everything. Dad was weak. Mom was soft. You were nothing. I was supposed to have it all." The medical team arrived, paramedics approaching cautiously, but Ryan wasn't done. The words poured out of him like poison being expelled from a wound. "Do you want to know the funny part?" He giggled hysterically. "The Demirovs knew everything. Sergei Kozlov showed me pictures. Mom interviewing his boss, writing stories that cost them millions. They knew who she was. They let me think I was so clever, but they were using me to hurt her, even after she was dead." "They manipulated you," Volkov said, stepping forward, "guided you toward killing your parents." "No," Ryan snarled. "I chose to kill them. Me not because of some vendetta I didn't know about. I killed Dad because I wanted his money. I killed Mom because I wanted her money. The syndicate just helped, gave me ideas, showed me how to hide assets, introduced me to people who could forge documents." "But you didn't know they were connected to your mother's past," Coleman stated. "Not until tonight," Ryan admitted. "When Kozlov called after the restaurant raid, he told me everything. How they'd been watching our family for 20 years. How they'd identified me as the weak link when I started gambling in college. How every debt I accumulated, every crime I committed, they were there to help, for a price." He started laughing again, the sound echoing off the concrete walls. "They own me. Every crime has their fingerprints on it. Every murder has their whispered suggestions behind it. I thought I was a criminal mastermind, but I was just their puppet." "Mr. Winters," one of the paramedics approached slowly. "We need to check your vitals. You seem to be in distress." "Distress!" Ryan screamed. "I murdered my parents. I destroyed my family, and for what? Money that isn't even mine anymore. The Demirovs took most of it. The FBI has the rest, and I'm going to die in prison." He lurched forward, suddenly breaking free from the marshal's grip with adrenaline-fueled strength. But instead of running, he charged straight at a concrete pillar, clearly intending to bash his own brains out rather than face justice. Thompson tackled him just in time, both men crashing to the ground. Ryan fought like a wild animal, screaming incoherently about shadows and poison and tea that tasted like tears. It took 4 marshals to restrain him enough for the paramedics to administer a sedative. As the medication took effect, Ryan's struggles weakened. He looked at me one last time, his eyes clearing slightly. "I used to push you on the swings," he said softly. "Remember, you'd laugh and say, 'Higher, higher.' When did I become a monster? Liza. When did I start wanting you dead, too?" The sedative pulled him under before I could answer. Not that I had an answer. How do you pinpoint the moment a brother becomes a killer? When does greed transform into murder? Had there ever been a time when Ryan was salvageable, or had the darkness always been there waiting? "He'll be placed on suicide watch," Coleman informed me as they loaded Ryan onto a gurney. "Full psychiatric evaluation, round-the-clock monitoring. We need him alive to testify." "Will he," I asked, "testify, I mean, after this breakdown?" "His confession just now was recorded and witnessed," Thompson said. "Combined with the physical evidence, your mother's documentation, and Volkov's intelligence, we don't necessarily need his cooperation. But his testimony could help us dismantle the entire network." We moved inside the courthouse, leaving the garage's chaos behind. The evidence boxes were being cataloged in a secure room while federal prosecutors prepared warrants based on the night's revelations. The Demirov syndicate's attempted assault on the storage facility had failed, with 6 operatives in custody and 2 killed in the firefight. Patricia stayed close to me as we were led to a secure conference room. Your mother would be proud, she said softly. You stood up to Ryan, helped expose the truth, and survived something that would have broken most people. I don't feel proud, I admitted. I feel empty. My brother killed our parents. My mother knew she was being murdered and let it happen. The mob manipulated our family for decades. How do you process that? Oh, one day at a time, Patricia said. One truth at a time. Your mother's sacrifice meant you lived. Her evidence means justice will be served. Ryan's breakdown means he'll face consequences for his crimes. It's messy and painful, but it's also closure. Through the conference room windows, I could see the city lights stretching out into darkness. Somewhere out there, the Demirov syndicate was scrambling to contain the damage. Corrupt officials were destroying evidence. Criminals were fleeing jurisdiction. All because my mother had never stopped being a journalist, even while being murdered by her own son. There's something else, Coleman said, entering with a tablet. We found this in your mother's effects at the storage unit. It's addressed to you dated just a week before her death. The video file showed my mother thin and obviously ill-sitting in her bedroom, but her eyes were clear and determined as she spoke to the camera. My dearest Liza, she began, her voice weak but steady. If you're watching this, then Patricia has done what I asked, and the truth has finally come out. I need you to know that every choice I made was to protect you. I could have stopped Ryan, but it would have meant trials, media attention, and danger to you from his associates. Instead, I chose to gather evidence and trust that justice would eventually prevail. I'm not brave, sweetheart. A brave woman would have turned her son in the moment she knew he'd killed his father. I'm just a mother who loved both her children, even the one who became a monster. Live your life free from the shadows that consumed our family. Bake your beautiful cakes, fall in love, have children if you want them. Don't let our tragedy define your future. And know that I loved you more than words could ever express. You were my light in the darkness, my hope that goodness could survive even in our broken family. Be happy, my darling girl. Be happy. The video ended, and I sat in silence, tears streaming down my face. Even dying from poison administered by her own son, my mother had thought only of protecting me and ensuring my future happiness. It was the final piece of the puzzle, the explanation for why she'd made the choices she had. Your mother was remarkable, Volkov said quietly. He'd been reviewing more of her journalism work on his laptop. Her investigations laid the groundwork for prosecutions that are still ongoing. She never stopped fighting for justice, even when justice meant sacrificing herself. Through my tears, I managed a small smile. She always said the truth was like yeast in bread. Give it time and the right conditions and it will rise. Even if you try to punch it down, it keeps growing until it can't be contained anymore. Poetic and accurate. Coleman agreed. Your mother's truth is rising now, and it's going to bring down an international crime syndicate, expose decades of corruption, and ensure your brother pays for his crimes. As the night wore on and prosecutors prepared their cases, I thought about the bakery that waited for me. Mom had bought the building, ensuring I'd always have a place to pursue my dreams. Tomorrow, or whenever this ended, I'd go back to making bread and pastries. But now I do it knowing the full truth of my family's tragedy and my mother's heroism. The monster who'd been my brother was sedated in a psychiatric ward facing life in prison, or possibly the death penalty. The syndicate that had manipulated him was crumbling under the weight of evidence. And I was alive, protected by a mother's love that had endured, even through her own murder. It wasn't justice yet, but it was coming. Like bread rising in the warmth, inevitable and unstoppable. The next morning came too quickly, bringing with it a gray dawn that matched my emotional exhaustion. I'd spent the night in federal protective custody, unable to sleep, replaying every revelation in my mind. Coleman arrived early with coffee and news that made my head spin all over again. We need to go to your bakery, she said without preamble. The FBI forensics team found something during their security sweep, something your mother built into the structure of the building. Built into the structure, I repeated, confused. I've been running that bakery for 5 years. I know every inch of it. Apparently not, Coleman said with a wry smile. Your mother was more thorough than anyone imagined. Also, Miss Walsh left something in your freezer, as she mentioned. We should retrieve that as well. An hour later, we stood in my bakery's kitchen, the familiar scent of yeast and flour, a comfort after the chaos of the previous night. FBI technicians had set up equipment throughout the space, and Patricia had joined us looking as tired as I felt. The building was constructed in 1962. The lead technician explained, pulling up architectural drawings on his tablet. But your mother had extensive renovations done in 2018, just after you signed the lease. She hired a very specific contractor, one who specialized in unique modifications. What kind of modifications? I asked, though I was beginning to suspect. Hidden compartments, reinforced walls, and this. He led us to what I'd always thought was a utility closet. With practiced movements, he pressed a specific pattern on what looked like ordinary wall panels. There was a soft click, and a section of the wall swung inward, revealing a hidden room. Oh my God, I breathed. The room was small but efficiently organized. Filing cabinets lined one wall, a desk sat in the corner with a computer that looked frozen in time, and boxes of documents were stacked neatly on shelves. But what drew my attention were the photographs covering an entire wall. Surveillance photos, newspaper clippings, and what looked like a massive investigation board with strings connecting various elements. Your mother continued her journalism work even after officially retiring, Patricia said softly. She told me she was writing a cookbook, but this is an investigation command center. Coleman was already examining the board. These are all city officials, judges, commissioners, city councilors, and they're all connected to the Demirov syndicate through various shell companies and intermediaries. I moved closer, recognizing some of the faces. Judge Harold Morrison, who ate at my bakery every Tuesday. Commissioner Janet Brooks, who'd helped me get my business permits. Council member David Chen, who'd been so supportive when I was struggling to make rent. They're all customers, I realized. Regular customers who've been coming here for years. Because your mother was documenting them, Coleman said, understanding, dawning in her eyes. She positioned you here in this building in knowing these corrupt officials would come. They thought they were just getting coffee and pastries, but she was photographing them, recording their conversations, building cases against them. Thompson, who'd been examining the computer, looked up sharply. This system is still active. It's been recording and uploading to a cloud server continuously. Every conversation in your dining area, every meeting these officials had over coffee, it's all here. My legs felt weak. She turned my bakery into a surveillance operation. She turned it into a trap, Patricia corrected gently. These people had been evading justice for years. Your mother found a way to document their crimes without them knowing, and she did it while giving you a successful business you loved. I sank into the desk chair, overwhelmed. Every morning I'd serve these people, chatting about the weather and local events, having no idea they were criminals being surveilled. My mother had made me an unwitting asset in her final investigation. There's more, the technician said, opening one of the filing cabinets. These documents detail financial transactions between the officials and known syndicate operatives, money laundering through city contracts, bribes for favorable rulings, protection for criminal operations. 20 years of corruption, all documented here. Look at this, Coleman said, pointing to a section of the investigation board focused on Judge Morrison. He presided over 3 cases where Demirov associates walked free, despite overwhelming evidence. Each time, large deposits were made to his daughter's college fund through a scholarship foundation that doesn't really exist. And Commissioner Brooks, Thompson added, reading from a file. She's been steering city contracts to construction companies owned by the syndicate. Millions in taxpayer dollars funding criminal operations. I thought about all the times Commissioner Brooks had complimented my eclairs, the way she'd always asked about my business, offering advice and support. Had she known who my mother was? Had she been watching me the way my mother had been watching her? "We need to get to that freezer," Coleman said suddenly. "Ms. Walsh said she left something for you." In the walk-in freezer behind boxes of frozen berries, we found a small, insulated package. Inside was a flash drive and a note in Jennifer's handwriting. "Liza, I took this from Ryan's apartment when I was playing the devoted fiancé. It contains his personal files, including detailed records of every official he bribed, threatened, or blackmailed. I thought it might complement your mother's work. Consider it a wedding gift to the happy couple. You and Justice. Stay safe, Jay." Thompson immediately bagged the drive for evidence processing. "If this contains what she says, it does." "It's the other side of the equation," Coleman finished. "Your mother documented the officials taking bribes. This might document Ryan giving them." We returned to the hidden room where technicians were carefully cataloging everything. On the desk, I noticed a leather journal worn from use. Opening it, I found my mother's handwriting dated just days before her death. The pieces are finally coming together. Ryan's involvement with the syndicate has accelerated their operations, making them sloppy. They're moving too fast, leaving trails they wouldn't normally leave. His greed might be the key to bringing them all down. I've confirmed that Judge Morrison will be presiding over any case involving Ryan. Commissioner Brooks has already been approached about making evidence disappear. Council member Chen is preparing to introduce legislation that would protect syndicate properties from seizure. But they don't know about this room. They don't know about the recordings, the photographs, the financial documentation. When the time comes, this evidence will destroy their carefully constructed network. I won't live to see it. Ryan's poison is working faster now, and I can barely hold down water. But Liza will be safe. The bakery will thrive. And someday, when someone discovers this room, justice will rain down like flour from a sifter, covering everything, getting into every crack impossible to fully clean away. My darling Liza, forgive me for making your sanctuary into a weapon, but some fights are too important to abandon even in death. I closed the journal, tears blurring my vision. My mother had orchestrated all of this, turning her impending murder into an opportunity to expose decades of corruption. She'd use my bakery, my dreams, as the perfect cover for her final investigation. "This changes everything," Coleman said quietly. "We're not just looking at the Demirov syndicate anymore. We're looking at systemic corruption throughout city government. Your mother mapped the entire network. 23 officials so far." Thompson reported, still reviewing files. Judges, police commissioners, city councilors, building inspectors, health department officials. All of them connected to the syndicate. All of them documented here. "And they all came here for coffee," I said, a hysterical laugh bubbling up. "I made them special birthday cakes, remembered their favorite orders, chatted about their families, and the whole time they were being investigated." Patricia put her arm around me. "Your mother was brilliant. She knew these people would never suspect a bakery run by her daughter. They saw you as harmless, someone they could patronize and control if needed. They never imagined Margaret Winters was still hunting them from beyond the grave." The technician who'd been working on the computer suddenly straightened. "You need to see this. The system just received an automated upload. It's flagged as final insurance." On the screen, a video file had appeared dated the day of my mother's death. We watched as she appeared on screen, sitting in this very room looking directly at the camera. If you're watching this, it means the automated system has detected that I haven't logged in for 30 days, confirming my death. What follows is my final gift to the justice system I served my entire life. The video continued for 47 minutes. My mother dying from the poison her son was feeding her methodically detailed every crime she documented, every connection she'd traced, every piece of evidence she'd gathered. She named names, provided dates, and explained the evidence in each filing cabinet. It was a complete roadmap for prosecutors created by a dying woman who refused to let her killers win. She knew Ryan would eventually expose himself, my mother said near the end of the video. His greed and arrogance would lead to his downfall. When that happened, investigators would come to the bakery and they would find this room. 20 years of work waiting like a time bomb for the right moment to explode. The video ended with my mother looking directly at the camera speaking to me. "Liza, my love, the bakery is yours, free and clear. The hidden room was my business, not yours. You knew nothing, and the authorities will confirm that. Keep making your beautiful pastries, keep bringing joy to people's lives, but maybe find some new regular customers. The ones you have now will be rather busy with their trials." The room fell silent as we absorbed the magnitude of what my mother had accomplished. Dying murdered by her own son, she'd still managed to construct a trap that would bring down not just her killers, but an entire network of corruption. "We'll need to close the bakery temporarily," Coleman said apologetically. "This is now a major crime scene. Every inch needs to be processed." "I understand," I said, still reeling. "How long?" "A few weeks, maybe a month. But when you reopen, you'll have the cleanest customer base in the city. No more corrupt officials using your space for their meetings." As we prepared to leave, I took one last look around the bakery I'd thought I knew so well. The ovens I used daily, the tables where criminals had plotted the walls that hid my mother's final investigation. She'd given me my dream while using it to complete hers. "Your mother was a hero," Volkov said quietly. He'd been silent during the discoveries, but now his respect was evident. She took down the Demirov syndicate and exposed widespread corruption while being slowly murdered. History will remember her as one of the greatest investigative journalists who ever lived. I thought about the simple tombstone that marked her grave, just her name and dates. No mention of her journalism career. Her investigation is her sacrifice. That would have to change. The world deserved to know who Margaret Winters really was. As we left the bakery, federal agents were already arriving to begin processing the evidence. By evening, arrest warrants would be issued for 24 officials. By tomorrow, the city's power structure would be in ruins. All because a dying woman had refused to stop fighting for justice, and a daughter had unknowingly served coffee to criminals, while evidence of their crimes accumulated in a hidden room behind her kitchen. My mother had always said the secret to good bread was patience and the right ingredients. Apparently, the same was true for justice. The federal courthouse had transformed into a fortress of activity by the evening. Emergency sessions were being called, arrest warrants signed, and protective custody arranged for witnesses. I sat in a secure conference room watching news reports on multiple screens as the city's power structure crumbled in real time. Breaking news: FBI arrests Judge Morrison on corruption charges. Commissioner Brooks taken into custody. City Council in emergency session as 5 members arrested. But it was the scene on the screen in the corner that held my attention. Ryan was in a psychiatric holding room being evaluated by federal psychiatrists. Through the one-way glass feed, I could see him rocking back and forth, his lips moving constantly, though no sound came through. "He's been like that for hours," Coleman said, entering with Thompson and a woman I didn't recognize. Dr. Sarah Winters, federal psychiatric evaluator, no relation, despite the name. Dr. Winters nodded professionally. "I've completed my preliminary evaluation of your brother. Would you like to hear my findings?" I wasn't sure I did, but I nodded anyway. "Ryan is experiencing a complete psychotic break," she explained. "The weight of his crimes combined with the revelation that he was manipulated by the syndicate has shattered his sense of self. He built his entire identity around being smarter than everyone else, being in control. Learning he was a puppet has destroyed that delusion." "Is he competent to stand trial?" Thompson asked. "Currently, no. but I believe with medication and therapy he can be stabilized enough to face justice. What's more interesting is what he's been saying during his delusional episodes. She pulled out a tablet showing transcribed recordings. He keeps confessing to crimes we didn't know about: insurance fraud, identity theft, even a hit and run from college that was never connected to him. It's as if his mind is purging every dark secret. On the screen, Ryan suddenly stood and began pacing, his movements jerky and uncoordinated. Then he started speaking, his voice coming through the speakers this time. "She knew," he said to the empty room. "Mom knew everything. She left me notes in my teacups, little pieces of paper that dissolved. 'I forgive you,' they said. 'I love you anyway.' Do you know what that's like, being forgiven while you're murdering someone?" Dr. Winters muted the feed. "He's been fixating on these supposed notes. We've found no evidence they existed, but he's convinced your mother was communicating with him throughout the poisoning." "That sounds like something she would do," Patricia said quietly. "Margaret always believed in redemption, even for those who didn't deserve it." "There's more," Dr. Winters continued. "He's also confessing to planning additional murders. Yours, Ms. Winters, Patricia Chen, several officials who he felt had cheated him. He has detailed plans in his apartment, which we've now seized." The revelation that Ryan had been planning to kill me shouldn't have been shocking after everything else, but it still felt like a punch to the gut. My brother, who taught me to ride a bike and protected me from bullies, had detailed plans for my murder. "He was going to make it look like a bakery accident," Coleman added grimly. "Gas leak, explosion. He'd researched your equipment, knew which valve to tamper with. The plan was to do it after the wedding when he'd have an alibi." I felt sick. Every morning I'd walked into my bakery, never knowing my brother had already planned how to kill me there. On the screen, Ryan's agitation was increasing. He grabbed his head, screaming, "The shadows have eyes. They're watching always, watching Mom's eyes in the shadows, disappointed but loving. How can eyes be disappointed and loving?" "We need to increase his sedation," Dr. Winters said, signaling to the medical team. "These episodes are becoming more violent." But before they could enter, Ryan did something unexpected. He became suddenly calm, looking directly at the one-way mirror as if he could see through it. "Liza," he said clearly, "I know you're watching. I need to tell you something before the shadows take me completely." Everyone in our room froze. There was no way he could know I was here, but his eyes seemed to find mine through the glass. "The safe," he continued, "in Mom's bedroom closet behind the panel. Combination is your birthday backward. Everything's in there. Everything I couldn't destroy. Her real will, the one I hid. The letters she wrote to you. The evidence about Dad's murder she gathered before I killed her. She knew I'd fail eventually. She prepared for it." Security immediately dispatched a team to our mother's house, which was still sealed as a crime scene. Ryan's moment of clarity didn't last. He began laughing hysterically, spinning in circles. "Do you want to know the funniest part?" he shouted. "I'm worth more dead than alive now the Demirovs put a price on my head. The FBI wants me alive. It's a bidding war for a worthless murderer. Mom would find that ironic. She always said I overvalued myself." The medical team finally entered, approaching Ryan carefully, but he wasn't done with his confessions. "Oh, 53, he screamed as they tried to restrain him. 53 crimes, count them, every theft, every fraud, every life I destroyed, and you only know about half." It took 3 orderlies to hold him still for the sedative injection. As the medication took effect, his struggles weakened, but his words became more disturbing. "Mom visits me," he mumbled, "sits on my bed, tells me about disappointment, says she failed me. Failed to teach empathy, failed to see the darkness, blames herself for creating a monster. But I was born this way. Wasn't I born wrong? Born broken. Born to take and take until nothing's left." He looked directly at the mirror one last time. "Tell Liza. Tell her the swings were real. The laughter was real. Before I became this thing, I was her brother. For a little while, I was just her brother." The sedative finally pulled him under, and he slumped in the orderly's hold. They transferred him to a gurney, strapping him down for transport to the secure psychiatric facility. He'll be under 24 hours suicide watch, Dr. Winters informed us. Multiple personality evaluations, constant monitoring. We can't risk losing him before trial. Will there even be a trial, I asked, with his mental state? The federal prosecutors are confident, Thompson said. His earlier video confession, the physical evidence, your mother's documentation. We don't need him competent to convict, but his testimony could help us completely dismantle the syndicate's operations. Coleman's phone buzzed. She answered, listened, then her eyes widened. They found the safe. Your mother's real will is inside along with... You need to see this. An hour later, we stood in my childhood home in my mother's bedroom where she died. The safe had been hidden behind a false panel, just as Ryan had said. Inside were documents that painted yet another layer to our family tragedy. The real will left everything to me with specific instructions that Ryan received nothing due to his criminal nature and danger to society. But it was the letters that broke my heart. Dozens of them, all addressed to me, all dated during her final months. My dearest Liza, one began, Ryan increased the mercury dosage today. I can taste it now, metallic and bitter. But I saw you through the window this morning, arriving at the bakery before dawn, and your smile gave me strength. You are building something beautiful while he destroys. That gives me hope for the future, even as mine ends. Another dated just days before her death. I've completed the investigation files in the bakery's hidden room. 20 years of work waiting for the right moment. Ryan thinks he's won by killing me, but he's only accelerated his own downfall. When he falls, he'll take the corrupt network with him. My death will mean something. But it was the final letter that destroyed me completely. Liza, my precious girl, by the time you read this, the truth will have emerged. You'll know what Ryan did, what I allowed, what I planned. You'll question every memory, every moment of our family life. Please don't. The love was real, even surrounded by lies. The joy was genuine, even shadowed by darkness. You are the best thing I ever did, the purest good to come from our broken family. Live brilliantly. Love freely. Trust again. Don't let our tragedy define you. Let it refine you like fire refines gold, burning away everything false and leaving only what's precious. You are precious, my darling. Never forget that. I sank onto my mother's bed, clutching the letters, sobbing for the woman who'd orchestrated justice while being murdered, who'd protected me even as poison coursed through her veins, who'd loved me enough to die rather than expose me to the full horror of our family's truth too soon. There's one more thing, Coleman said gently, holding a sealed envelope marked, "For the authorities, open only after Ryan's arrest." Inside was a detailed account of the murder of Robert Winters, my father. My mother had found evidence years after his death. Ryan's journal, the receipt for brake fluid, even photographs Ryan had taken of the tampered brake lines kept as trophies. She'd preserved it all, waiting for the right time to ensure justice. She could have had him arrested years ago, Thompson observed. Why wait? Because she knew the Demirov syndicate was involved by then, Volkov said, understanding. If Ryan had been arrested earlier, the syndicate would have disappeared, reformed elsewhere. She waited until she could document the entire network, until Ryan's crimes would expose everyone connected to him. The weight of my mother's sacrifice hit me anew. She'd lived for years knowing her son had murdered her husband. She'd let that same son poison her to death, all to build an airtight case that would bring down not just Ryan, but an entire criminal empire. Your mother was playing chess while everyone else played checkers, Coleman said with genuine admiration. She turned her own murder into the catalyst for the largest corruption investigation in the city's history. Through the bedroom window, I could see news vans gathering outside. The story was spreading. The baker whose brother killed their parents, whose mother posthumously exposed a criminal empire. By tomorrow, our family tragedy would be international news. But all I could think about was Ryan's final moment of clarity. For a little while, I was just her brother. Somewhere in the twisted maze of his mind did a fragment of that boy still exist, the one who'd pushed me on swings and held my hand on the first day of school. Or had that child been in a facade too, a mask worn by a nascent psychopath, still learning to mimic human emotion? I'd never know. That Ryan, if he'd ever truly existed, was as dead as our parents. What remained was a broken killer facing justice, a psychiatric patient confessing to crimes in his delirium, a puppet whose strings had been cut, collapsing into madness. The monster who'd been my brother was gone, leaving only the echoes of his confessions and the weight of his crimes. And I was left standing in my mother's bedroom holding letters written by a dying woman who'd loved me enough to let herself be murdered rather than risk my safety, who'd built an investigation that would ensure justice long after her death. The ultimate maternal sacrifice, turning her own murder into her children's salvation, one from danger, one from himself. 1 week after Ryan's complete psychological collapse, Patricia called with urgency in her voice. "Liza, we need to meet at my office immediately. I've discovered something extraordinary about your mother's estate." The city was still reeling from the arrests. 27 officials were now in custody, 3 more had fled the jurisdiction, and the Demirov syndicate's operations were in ruins. I'd been staying in a federal safe house, unable to return to my bakery or apartment while authorities processed evidence and ensured my safety. Patricia's office occupied the top floor of a downtown high-rise, its windows offering panoramic views of a city transforming under the weight of exposed corruption. She waited with Coleman Thompson and a woman I didn't recognize, elderly but sharp-eyed, wearing a suit that screamed expensive lawyer. "This is Helen Cartwright," Patricia introduced. "She was your mother's literary attorney for the past 25 years. What she's about to reveal? Well, you should sit down." I took a seat, bracing for yet another revelation about my mother's hidden life. Helen Cartwright opened a leather briefcase and began laying out documents with practiced precision. "Your mother, Margaret Ann Winters, was also known by several pen names," she began. M.A. Blackwood, Sarah Thornfield, and most successfully Rebecca St. James. Rebecca St. James, I gasped. "The true crime author, she wrote Blood in the Boardroom and The Gentleman Killer." "Among others," Helen confirmed. 15 bestsellers over 20 years, all meticulously researched investigations into real crimes. Your mother didn't just report on crime, she solved cold cases, exposed cover-ups, and built a reputation as one of the most thorough investigative authors in the business." Patricia activated a laptop showing book covers I'd seen in stores, never imagining they were written by my mother. She kept this completely separate from her family life. Even I only learned about it recently. The books generated substantial income. Helen continued producing financial statements. Royalties, film rights, speaking fees, all deposited into accounts managed by my firm. As of today, those accounts contain approximately $10.3 million. The room spun slightly. $10 million? "Your mother lived modestly by choice," Helen explained. "She reinvested most earnings into her investigations, hiring private detectives, forensic experts traveling to crime scenes. But she always intended this money for you, Liza. It was kept separate from the family trust specifically to ensure Ryan could never access it." She produced a document that made my hands shake as I read it. A will dated 5 years ago, leaving everything in the literary estate to me. But it was accompanied by a sealed envelope marked "to be opened only upon complete exposure of Ryan's crimes." With trembling fingers, I broke the seal. Inside was a memory card and a letter in my mother's handwriting. Patricia helped me load the memory card into her laptop, revealing a video file dated just 1 month before my mother's death. My mother appeared on screen, sitting in what I now recognized as the hidden room in my bakery. She looked directly at the camera, her eyes clear despite her obvious illness. "My dearest Liza," she began, "if you're watching this, then my final investigation has concluded successfully. Ryan has been exposed, the corrupt network has been dismantled, and you're finally free to know the complete truth." She paused, taking a sip of water with hands that shook slightly. "I've been writing as Rebecca St. James for your entire life. Every crime I investigated, every book I published was training for the final case, our own family tragedy. The money I earned was always meant for you, but more than that, I wanted to leave you a legacy of truth." The video continued for 20 minutes. My mother detailed her writing career, the cases she'd solved, the criminals she'd helped convict through her investigative books. She showed photographs of herself at book signings, always in disguise. Wigs, glasses, careful makeup to ensure she wouldn't be recognized as Margaret Winters. "I learned early in my career that criminals often hide in plain sight," she explained. "They rely on people's inability to see past surface appearances. So I became someone else when I worked, someone Ryan and his associates would never connect to his suburban mother." She held up a manuscript. "My final book is complete. The Good Son, a Mother's Investigation into Family and Evil. It details Ryan's crimes from his first theft at age 12 through my own murder. Every piece of evidence is documented, every connection mapped. Helen has instructions to publish it after the trials conclude." "It's already generating interest," Helen interjected. "Major publishers are bidding. Conservative estimates suggest it could earn another $5 million in advances and royalties." But my mother wasn't done. "The building your bakery occupies, I bought it with my first major advance. The renovations that created the hidden room, funded by royalties from the courthouse murders. Every investment I made was to create a safe space for you while documenting the criminals who thought they were untouchable." She smiled, then the expression both sad and proud. "You thought you were just making pastries, but you were the honey in a trap, years in the making. Every corrupt official who walked through your doors, every criminal who met over coffee at your tables, they were being documented by the best-selling true crime author they'd never heard of." This is incredible," Thompson breathed. "She ran a 20-year investigation while maintaining a completely separate identity as a successful author." The video neared its end. My mother looked tired but determined. "I know learning this adds another layer to your grief, another secret, another deception. But this one was born of love and necessity. The Demirovs, the corrupt officials, Ryan, they all believed they were dealing with a naive housewife. They never imagined Margaret Winters was the same woman whose books had sent dozens of criminals to prison." She held up a photograph, her with me at my culinary school graduation. "This is my favorite picture. You achieving your dreams through honest work. You are everything I hoped you'd be. Kind, talented, incorruptible. The money is yours, but more importantly, the truth is yours. Use both wisely." The video ended with her looking directly at the camera. "Live brilliantly, my darling girl. The shadows are lifting and your future is unlimited. I love you beyond words, beyond death, beyond justice itself. Be happy." I sat in stunned silence as Helen continued laying out documents, bank accounts in my name, investment portfolios, royalty agreements, film rights. My mother had built a fortune while investigating crimes, all hidden from the son who would have stolen it, and the criminals who would have targeted her. "There's also this," Patricia said, producing a key, "safety deposit box at the Chase branch on 5th Street. Your mother's instructions say it contains personal items she wanted you to have." 2 hours later, after signing papers that made me wealthier than I'd ever imagined, we stood in the bank vault. The safety deposit box was larger than standard, requiring 2 keys to open. Inside were items that made me cry all over again. My parents' real wedding rings, not the replicas Ryan had sold, photo albums from before Ryan's darkness emerged, showing a happy family I barely remembered. My father's watch, the one he had worn every day until his death, and at the bottom, wrapped in silk, my grandmother's complete jewelry collection. Not just the necklace Ryan had given Madison, but pieces I'd never seen. She saved everything that mattered, Patricia said softly. Everything Ryan tried to steal or destroy. There was one final item, a leather journal marked for Liza, my real thoughts. Inside, my mother had written entries throughout my life documenting my achievements, her pride, her love. No mention of investigations or Ryan's crimes, just a mother's joy in watching her daughter grow. She lived 3 lives, Coleman observed. Mother investigator and author. She kept them separate to protect everyone, but they all led to this moment. What will you do now? Patricia asked. With the money, the book writes the complete freedom. I thought about it as we left the bank. My mother had given me more than money. She'd given me choices. I could walk away from everything, start fresh somewhere Ryan's crimes couldn't touch. I could use the wealth to disappear, to build a new life free from the shadow of our family tragedy. But that wasn't what she'd want. I'm going to reopen the bakery, I decided, but differently. I want to create a space that honors what Mom really was, someone who fought for truth and justice. Maybe a community center attached, offering free legal aid to crime victims, a place where people can find help, not hide corruption. The Margaret Winters Center for Justice, Patricia suggested. The Rebecca St. James Foundation, I corrected. Let her pen name do good openly for once. As we drove back through the city, I saw the aftermath of my mother's final investigation everywhere. Empty offices where corrupt officials once worked news vans at the courthouse covering ongoing trials. FBI agents still processing crime scenes. The Demirov syndicate's American operations were finished, their assets frozen, their network exposed. All because a dying woman refused to let her murder be meaningless. That night in the safe house, I read my mother's journal cover to cover. Her entries about me were filled with love and pride, documenting every milestone, every achievement. The final entry, dated the day before her death, was simple. Liza made a perfect croquant bouche today. Watched her through the bakery window, concentrating so hard, creating something beautiful and temporary. That's life, isn't it? Beautiful and temporary. But the love remains. The truth remains. And my darling girl remains ready to build something even more beautiful on the foundation I've left. My work is done. Hers is just beginning. I closed the journal and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere Ryan was sedated in a psychiatric facility, confessing to crimes in his delirium. The officials he'd corrupted were in custody, their careers destroyed. The syndicate that had manipulated him was crumbling internationally. And I was here inheriting not just money, but a legacy of truth-seeking justice, and the unconditional love of a mother who'd orchestrated her own murder's investigation. Tomorrow, I'd meet with architects about renovating the bakery. Next week, I'd establish the foundation. Next month, I'd begin the long process of healing while helping others find justice. My mother had written 15 bestsellers exposing crime and corruption. Her 16th and final book would expose her own family's tragedy while ensuring her daughter could finally truly live freely. The greatest plot twist of her career, turning murder into rebirth, tragedy into triumph, death into a new beginning. 6 months later, I stood in front of my renovated bakery, watching the morning sun gleam off the new sign, Sunrise Bakery and the Rebecca St. James Foundation. The renovation had taken 4 months, transforming the space while carefully preserving the integrity of what my mother had built. The hidden room was now a small museum displaying her investigative work, and the main floor had been expanded to include a community center offering free legal aid to crime victims. "Are ready for this?" Patricia asked, standing beside me with the ceremonial ribbon-cutting scissors. I nodded, though my hands trembled slightly. Today wasn't just a reopening, it was a resurrection of sorts. The media had been covering the story for months, and a small crowd had gathered, including many who'd been helped by my mother's investigations over the years. Detective Coleman was there now, heading a new anti-corruption task force formed in the wake of the mass arrests. Agent Thompson had flown in from D.C., where he was testifying in the federal cases against the Demirov syndicate. Even Dmitry Volkov had come no longer undercover, wearing his official Interpol credentials proudly. Before we cut the ribbon, I said into the microphone, my voice carrying across the crowd, I want to share something my mother wrote in her final letter to me. She said, "Truth is like yeast in bread. Give it time and the right conditions, and it will rise. Even if you try to punch it down, it keeps growing until it can't be contained anymore." I paused, seeing nods of understanding from those who'd followed the story. Today, we're not just opening a bakery, we're creating a space where truth can rise, where victims can find support, and where my mother's legacy of fearless investigation continues. The ribbon fell away and people began filing in. The aroma of fresh bread and pastries filled the air. I'd been baking since 3 a.m. using my mother's recipes, including some I'd found in her papers that she'd never shared. The display cases were full, the coffee was brewing, and for the first time in months, I felt like myself again. The community center side was already busy. 3 pro bono lawyers were meeting with clients, all victims of crimes that had gone uninvestigated until now. The Demirov trials had exposed so many cover-ups that we had a waiting list of people seeking help. Liza. A familiar voice made me turn. Jennifer Walsh stood in the doorway, though she looked nothing like the Madison Worthington persona I'd known. Her hair was its natural brown, her style simple and understated. "I hope it's okay that I came." Jennifer," I said, genuinely surprised. "I thought you were in witness protection." Was," she corrected with a smile. "My testimony helped convict 17 members of the syndicate. The Demirovs are too busy fighting federal charges to worry about me now. I'm actually working as a consultant for the FBI, helping them identify similar schemes." She handed me an envelope. "I wanted to give you this in person. It's from your brother." My blood chilled. "Ryan." "He's stabilized on medication," Jennifer explained. "Still facing life in prison, but he's competent now. He asked his lawyer to give me this during one of my testimony sessions. Said I was the only person who might actually deliver it." I took the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a single page, Ryan's handwriting more controlled than I'd seen it in years. "Liza, they tell me I'm sane enough to understand my crimes now. I wish I wasn't. The weight of what I've done. Killing our parents, planning your death, destroying so many lives. It would break me if I wasn't already broken. I won't ask for forgiveness. Some things are unforgivable, but I need you to know that somewhere buried under all the greed and hatred and sickness, there was a moment when I was just your brother. The swings were real. The laughter was real. Before I became a monster, I loved you. I've confessed to everything, testified against the syndicate, the corrupt officials, everyone I hurt. It's not redemption. Nothing could redeem what I've done, but maybe it's a start at making sure no one else suffers because of my choices. Live the life Mom wanted for you. Be happy, be free, and know that the brother who pushed you on the swings would be proud of the woman you've become, even as the monster I became deserves every moment of punishment coming. Ryan." I folded the letter carefully, unsure how to feel. Could I mourn the brother I'd lost while celebrating justice for the monster he'd become? Was there space in my heart for both grief and relief? "He means it," Jennifer said quietly. "I've seen enough cons to know when someone's playing an angle. Your brother's broken in ways that can't be fixed, but the remorse is real." I tucked the letter into my apron pocket. Maybe someday I'd know what to do with it. For now, I had customers to serve and a legacy to build. The day flew by in a blur of activity. Former customers who'd been arrested were replaced by new faces. Honest citizens, victims finding support, journalists covering the ongoing trials, Judge Morrison's table now hosted a support group for families of murder victims. Commissioner Brooks' corner booth was occupied by law students offering free consultations. By afternoon, we'd served over 300 customers, and the community center had helped 15 people file claims related to crimes the corrupt officials had covered up. My mother's dream was becoming reality, a place where truth was served alongside pastries. She would be so proud, Patricia said during a quiet moment watching the bustling space. Ish, she is proud, I corrected, touching the pocket where her letter rested. Somewhere she's watching and smiling. As the day wound down, I found myself in the room that had once been hidden, now transformed into a small museum. Display cases showed my mother's books, her investigation notes carefully redacted, and photos from her secret career. A plaque on the wall read, Margaret Winters, Rebecca St. James, mother journalist, seeker of truth. Visitors moved through, quietly reading about how one woman had built a 20-year investigation while raising a family, how she'd turned her own murder into the catalyst for justice. Some left flowers, others simply stood in silent respect. "Hello, ma'am." A young woman approached hesitantly. "Are you Liza Winters?" "I am," I confirmed. "Your mother's books helped solve my sister's murder 5 years ago," she said, tears in her eyes. "The police had given up, but Cold Case's Warm Hearts detailed a similar case. We pushed for DNA testing based on her analysis, and they found the killer. I wanted to thank you. And her." Stories like this repeated throughout the day. People whose lives had been touched by my mother's work, never knowing that Rebecca St. James was a suburban mother investigating crimes between school pickups and family dinners. As closing time approached, I stood behind the counter where I'd served countless customers over the years, never knowing I was part of my mother's final investigation. The space looked different now. Brighter, more open, filled with hope instead of hidden cameras. But the essence remained a place where community gathered, where stories were shared, where truth could rise like well-proofed dough. Coleman stopped by one last time before leaving. "The final count is in," she reported. "Based on your mother's evidence and the subsequent investigation, 43 convictions, 200 million in seized assets, and the complete dismantling of the Demirov syndicate's American operations. Your mother didn't just solve crimes, she cleaned up an entire city." I smiled, exhausted but satisfied. She always said journalism was about afflicting the comfortable and comforting the afflicted. Guess she managed both. As I locked up that night, I paused at the threshold. 6 months ago, I'd been a simple baker, unaware of the secrets surrounding me. Now I was a millionaire running a foundation. My family's tragedy had become international news, and my mother was being posthumously awarded the Pulitzer Prize for investigative journalism. But at my core, I was still the same person my mother had raised, someone who believed in hard work, honesty, and the power of bringing people together. The money hadn't changed that. The tragedy hadn't broken it. If anything, learning the truth had strengthened my resolve to live the way she'd taught me. My phone buzzed with a text from one of the lawyers at the foundation. 3 more families seeking help with cold cases. Your mother's work continues to inspire people to seek justice." I smiled already, planning tomorrow's pastries. Cinnamon rolls for the support group eclairs for the law students, and a special cake for a family finally getting their day in court after years of cover-ups. Each baked good a small comfort, each cup of coffee a warm welcome to those seeking truth. The bell above the door chimed as I left, the same bell my mother had installed years ago. But now I knew it had been more than decoration. It had been part of her surveillance system, alerting the hidden cameras to start recording. Even the smallest details had been part of her plan. As I walked to my car, I pulled out Ryan's letter one more time. The streetlight illuminated his words about the swings, about the laughter, about the love that had existed before the darkness. Maybe that's what tragedy does. It doesn't erase the good memories, but it recontextualizes them, adding layers of sadness to moments of joy. I drove home through streets that were safer now, cleaner, after the corruption had been exposed. The city was healing just as I was healing, just as the victims finding help at the foundation were healing. It would take time, years, perhaps decades, but the process had begun. That night, I dreamed of my mother, not the frail woman poisoned by her son, not the investigative journalist building cases in secret, but the mother who'd taught me to bake, who'd cheered at my graduations, who'd loved me unconditionally even as darkness consumed our family. In the dream, she was in the bakery's kitchen teaching me her secret recipe for sourdough starter. "The secret," she said with a smile, "is patience. You feed it, nurture it, keep it alive through good times and bad, and then one day, when you least expect it, it's strong enough to make something wonderful rise." I woke with tears on my cheeks, but a smile on my lips. The metaphor wasn't subtle, but then my mother had never been subtle about her love. She'd fed and nurtured me, kept me safe through the worst times, and now I was rising, creating something wonderful from the foundation she'd left. The trials would continue for months. Ryan would spend his life in prison. The city would slowly rebuild its trust in institutions, and I would be here baking bread and serving coffee, offering comfort and seeking justice, living the life my mother had sacrificed everything to ensure I could have. It wasn't the ending anyone would have chosen, but it was real, honest, and ultimately hopeful. My mother had always said that the best stories were the ones that made people think, that challenged assumptions, that revealed truth no matter how painful. Her final story, our family's tragedy, had done all of that and more, and now it was my turn to write the next chapter, one pastry, one cup of coffee, one act of justice at a time. The Rebecca St. James Foundation would ensure that my mother's work continued, that victims found support, that truth kept rising, no matter who tried to suppress it. And Sunrise Bakery would remain what it had always been, even when I didn't know it, a place where the community gathered, where stories were shared, and where even the darkest secrets couldn't stay hidden forever. As I looked at my calendar for the next day, full of appointments, foundation meetings, and baking schedules, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: genuine optimism. The worst was over. The truth was out. And the future, while uncertain, was finally mine to shape. My mother had given me that freedom through her sacrifice. Ryan had inadvertently ensured it through his crimes, and I would honor both the love and the pain by living fully, helping others, and never forgetting that sometimes the greatest gift a parent can give their child is the truth, no matter how much it costs. The sun would rise tomorrow on a cleaner city, a safer community, and a bakery that served justice alongside its pastries. And I would be there, aproned and ready, carrying on a legacy that had been 20 years in the making and would last for generations to come. Dear readers, if you've made it this far, I hope this story has touched your heart as much as it challenged your expectations. We've explored themes of family betrayal, justice, and ultimately redemption through the most unlikely circumstances. Have you ever discovered a family secret that changed everything you thought you knew? How do we reconcile love for family with the need for justice? Can truth really set us free, even when that truth is devastating? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more narratives that explore the complex depths of human nature. And if you know someone who loves psychological thrillers with heart, please share this story with them. Thank you for joining me on this emotional journey. Remember, like my mother said, truth is like yeast in bread. It always finds a way to rise. May you find the courage to face your own truths and the strength to rise above whatever challenges life brings. Until next time, keep seeking truth, serving justice, and finding sweetness, even in life's bitter moments.